Hello, my friends. Welcome to New Kids with a Shop, brought to you by the Arcade Comics, Collectibles, and Games, located in Fort Wayne, Windiana. I am Matt Cade.
And I am Craig Ray. And this is Can't Get Enough, 85 Years with the Man of Steel.
Arcade.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to New Kids with the Shop. Today we are joined by Shayne Pace.
How's it going?
And Rick Shupe.
Hello.
And we are talking about Superman. This is Can't Get Enough, 85 Years with the Man of Steel. That's a Shayne Pace original right there.
And it's only going to get better from there.
Absolutely. So, for those of you that don't know, this episode is based upon the fact that Superman celebrated his birthday this week. On April 18th, 1938, Action Comics #1 was actually released by Siegel and Schuster, obviously. And we're just going to take this opportunity to talk about, we're not going to go deep into the history. It's going to be more about how we feel about Superman, how he's influenced us throughout the years. So we're going to be talking radio, television shows, movies, and we're going to wrap it all up with our top comics or comic runs. It could be an individual book and so on and so forth. But starting off, I figured, there's a good opportunity to bring Rick in because he has, collected for a very long time and was there at the beginning. Like, do you want to, I know you said, we had mentioned before that you weren't really around for the radio stuff so much. That's more of a thing for your dad, but you were there for the George Reeves Superman, the show, and kind of talk about the impact that had, how it brought Superman from just a comics medium into being in every household.
If I might, I wanted to say that my dad had pointed out to me that the radio show had Bud Collyer, which was at that time in my life was a popular TV host, but had been a voice actor for years and portrayed Superman on the radio. And he was a very popular guy, in a Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel kind of way. Everyone knew who Bud Collyer was, but we never knew he was Superman because that was the other generation. Mm-hmm. But he used to host, I think it was To Tell the Truth, every afternoon when we'd come home from school. And also, when we came home from school, would be the George Reeves Superman TV show. Nice. And, here as a young man, I had gotten started reading comics, and I had Batman and Superman and a lot of the other early DC characters available to me. But somehow seeing Superman live, on the air, literally in the air too, busting through walls and saving Lois and Jimmy and Perry White, it was a special moment. And there's a number of bad things that they did because they tried to gear it toward children later on as the ratings began to drop. But in the early days, there was a lot for adults. And even as someone who had read a lot of comics and was interested in excitement of the more mature nature, even as a young boy, I appreciated the mysteries and some of the more dangerous elements that were shown. For a boy, it really got my imagination going. And I had a few stories that stuck out to me.
I watched it in syndication, like growing up, and I had seen those, but I think that was around the same time I was watching like Batman the animated series. It was still into syndication. Like, was it a TV Land or Nick at Night? Did somebody have it at some point?
Oh, yeah, it was a Nick at Night thing.
Yeah, Nick at Night. Nickelodeon always played.
So that was how I actually was exposed to it, is later in the syndication. And I still, at that age, I was still like, how'd they make it look like he was flying? Even though it wasn't that convincing, but it was awesome.
What I love too is you knew he was jumping onto a trampoline, although as a kid maybe I didn't perceive that right at first. I wanted to believe it was Superman, and so I accepted that Superman was leaping out that window. But as I grew older and watched the reruns, I perceived that the trampoline was involved. It's just that he was fearless. That particular actor, George Reeves, he put himself into it, and when he went and jumped on that trampoline and took off, he knew he was going to land on something soft, but, that doesn't always work every time, and he was so into it and trying to portray the character correctly. I thought it was really exciting and looked fantastic on film.
Yeah. So, that's my only exposure, honestly, to George. Like, what else did he do? Is that what made him? Or
he played some twins in Gone with the Wind at the very beginning of Gone with the Wind,
and he tried to break out of that mold, but he couldn't. He had a role in From Here to Eternity. Great film, but he got cut because test audiences couldn't get past
that he was Superman.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And that was very depressing for him. I remember in the media they talked about that in interviews.
It's too bad.
So
based on the George Reeves show and the comics up to that time, I think it's safe to say that the leading cause of death among young women in America was getting ran over by a train, or almost getting ran over by a train. It was
a big problem.
It
they
was,
had to
it was
fix.
an epidemic in the 30s and 40s. So
It's kind of like the circus stuff, yes.
yeah,
I just wanted to mention, if we have time for it, there was a couple of episodes that if you ever get a chance to look up, I would really highly recommend.
Specific episodes of the show?
Yeah, any fan of Superman, it ran for several years, and there was plenty of weak ones toward the end when they went to the
kid format.
And unfortunately, the ones where they went that way were the color ones, which are
Sure.
today, more interesting. But the black and white ones, there was a great seaside mystery with just Jimmy and Clark, and it's one of the first 10 episodes, I think, where there's a mysterious house on a shore near a lighthouse, and it's very misty, and there's a murder that's has happened, and they're going to investigate for the Daily Planet, and it's just a very creepy, still to this day, good story, well told, and the fact that Superman's there makes it a lot of fun for a young person.
Yeah.
Another one that was really outstanding to me was really in previous to anybody writing a film like the Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck film about the asteroid coming to strike Earth.
Armageddon,
yes. They did a story where that was going to happen, in this particular scenario with Superman. And a scientist invented a bomb that he would have Superman fly up and put on the asteroid and blow it up before it could get to Earth. And it was a very exciting thing because as a child, we'd never heard of anything like this, and the fear of that was tremendous.
And Aerosmith hadn't done the soundtrack.
I was just going to say the same thing.
So he grabs he is very concerned that things are going to go wrong, but he says, I'll take it and give it a try. And he flies up there and he lands on the asteroid and plants the explosive and sets it. And I think I had a timer on it, and he just barely gets off the planet or asteroid, and it explodes.
Very scientifically, I'm sure, right?
that was a close call for America. My grandparents still remember where they were the day that
happened.
that it almost. Yeah.
Well, I have to admit, as an adult, I've gone back and looked at it again, and unfortunately, when he lands on the asteroid to put the bomb down, you can hear a bird tweaking. But because it's filmed in the back lot. But whatever. Anyways, it was exciting, and it felt dramatic for a child. It was about as much fingernails, digging into the sofa as you can imagine. And it exploded, and then when he kind of arrived back on Earth, he ended difficultly, and he had lost his memory. And so for the rest of the episode, he doesn't know he's Superman. And everyone's asking, did Superman survive? Where is Superman? We need Superman. Mm-hmm. And so to see that unfold and how they decide to...
That's pretty witty, though.
That was very, very well done and an interesting sci-fi kind of story.
Cool.
And there's another one where some criminals get a hold of a weapon, mad scientist kind of character has invented, and they use it against Superman, and it freezes him. Mm-hmm. Like he's white.
Okay.
And he has no powers. It draws everything in his body, all of his... functions are reduced as any human would be if they were exposed to deep cold, but this is an extreme version of that.
Right.
He has no powers, and he's white. And then, of course, he's needed at the Daily Planet, and how's Superman going to go
right.
be Clark Kent when his face is white? So it's like he's putting on makeup and trying to simulate no normal human, but he's in a lot of trouble because he can't fly. There's a danger. This mad scientist and this gang are, causing trouble around town, and he has no powers to stop them.
That's so awesome, though. Like it feel like when I watched it, it was very like the word comes up on here all the time. It was whimsical. I mean, it was just like it wasn't too serious, and it was just the perfect amount of like. And I loved. Didn't you love the sound part of it, Rick? Like when you started hearing the.
Oh yes.
Like you knew. Like, you were like.
My little heart would be racing to hear that, and the theme music would start when he leaped out the window, and it was very, very exciting. I just wanted to touch on a couple more of these if I could, though, because I know people probably haven't gone back at this time to see those things, but they were very, very, very good for a fan of Superman.
Yeah, go for it.
And another one was where he was split in half, and it happened.
Top and bottom, or left and right?
Two versions of the same man.
Oh, okay.
And one had invulnerability, like bullets would bounce off, but he couldn't fly, and the other one could fly, but he was wounded when he took off flying. The criminal shot at him. He was wounded. So that was an exciting episode where could he ever get himself back together again?
Okay.
Or was he going to be split into these two people that would not have enough power to really fight crime the way he wanted to?
Sure.
That was very exciting.
How soon into the run were all of these? Like how many? I don't even know.
I think it was 5 years of the series, maybe, and These were all within the first 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Maybe the first two, a lot of them.
Remember in Superman 3 where they split them in two and one was evil and they fought in a junkyard? That moment, it's as good as the rest of that movie sounds.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think
I
a lot of these
vaguely
ideas may have
remember
come
it.
from
Sounds
those
good,
old
yeah.
stories, maybe,
Sure.
possibly. Another one that was exciting as a boy was there was a mysterious crime wave going on where these skyscraper and big buildings downtown Metropolis were being robbed of valuables and secrets, and they couldn't figure out how it was being done. And Superman eventually figured out that it was a little mob from a circus, because we love circuses.
Of course.
And
Sick, Carney.
they had the strong man and the human fly, who was like a trapeze artist, and a magician who was the brains behind the whole thing. And they had planned all these robberies to make it look like Superman was doing them, because they were all like on the 50th floor.
Right.
And of course the fly could go up there, the human fly could crawl up. And then the strength to rip open the safe was the strong man from the circus. Oh, my God. So, I mean, it was very interesting to see that develop as a boy. It was like my early first mystery, how it was being done.
That's awesome, though.
Well, and they often pointed out the red underwear on the outside are the design comes from the circus strongman, and that's why
The trunks?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And in this case, to differentiate, they had the circus strongman wearing a kind of a Tarzan over-the-shoulder animal skin, because that would
The
be a better choice.
Recently, speaking on that, even Shayne, James Gunn actually put up a poll when it was announced asking Superman trunks or no trunks.
Oh yeah, trunks all day.
See, I think trunks lost,
Yeah, well,
but
so did
they're wrong though, right?
yeah.
Agreed.
That's
Trunks or no trunks.
why
Right?
you don't ask the internet.
I'm a no-trunk guy now.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't see anything wrong with it until my friends, as I got older, started making fun of it. And then I realized I don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm now a non-trunk guy. And Henry Cavill did such a great job in that.
Cavill looks great
Yeah.
without the trunks.
I am a non-trunk guy. as well.
Non-trunks.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if you just change that word trunk to underwear.
But we wouldn't have underoos if there hadn't been at least a phase.
Oh, yeah.
It's cool.
I have one last story with this old Superman character, and then I'll
Okay.
let you guys go on to the more modern stuff. There was a great, this is so typical Silver Age, there was a great episode where some people were trying to confuse Perry White because he was the editor of the newspaper and had a lot of power, especially in fighting crime, helping the police by, promoting what they were doing and showing the evil that was going out there and who might be involved in it and naming names and causing investigations. And so the reason the bad guys wanted to get rid of him was because he was so powerful. And in this way, they had a fellow impersonate Caesar's ghost, which, as we all know in the old comics,
Great Caesar's
Perry
ghost.
White always said that. And so he was crazy to think that it might be Caesar's ghost, but he didn't know what the plot was, and it had to develop over a period of time that you saw that it was really just the bad guys, trying to undermine him and make him have a breakdown so he wouldn't be a reporter and report these, big crime waves.
That's as ridiculous as Chris O'Donnell saying "Holy rusted metal, Batman."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Or as a man in his mid-20s getting adopted by a billionaire. But we digress.
But if you look at all those old comics from the era that I was reading them, that was a very typical kind of thing. There'd be some wacky cover picture illustration of a unicorn or something. Hercules would come, or
Sure.
there would always be a twist or a trick to it as to why that was there. But yet it made a great story. And in this case, the Caesar's ghost was a guy walking around like a Roman in Perry White's apartment and convincing him he was crazy. And I thought it was just really a nice Silver Age tip of the hat.
It sounds like a lot of fun. I think I have them somewhere. I need to go back and watch that one.
I think you're reading the comics at the time too, right?
Yeah, I was reading simultaneously, and of course the comics, maybe were more what I really liked. But just seeing it live and seeing some of it seemed a little cornier on TV, of course, even to a child. But it was great to see the action, the breaking through the walls and the bullets bouncing off of him, and him grabbing guns and bending them in his bare hands,
Right.
throwing them over his shoulder like telling the crook, "You've had it."
Right.
I just loved seeing that live.
So from there, then, and I'm not completely positive, was the next time he was live action, was that 78? Was there anything in between?
Not that I'm aware of.
I can't think of
I
anything
thought it
else.
just cut off and it was like
Yeah.
There was nothing else from that
in
point.
In the 60s, Batman supplanted Superman as the number one DC character. Up until that point, from 38 to 65 or whatever,
Yeah.
Superman was all there was as far as comic fans, and then suddenly Batman took over.
Yeah.
What have the last 65, 70 years you've been reading and watching? What are your favorite changes, and what are some of your least favorite changes they made to the Man of Steel?
One of the things I really hated, I think it was in the 80s, but I might be remembering wrong, they went overboard with, they saw how popular it was that Christopher Reeve had portrayed him with a little bit of a light manner in his daily life, and they overdid it and made him just an outright wimp for about, 10 years.
Oh, the clumsy part, you mean, and all that?
More than just, he was clumsy, but he was also like a fool. And I never really thought they were on the right track with that. And I remember used to be a sports writer that worked at the Daily Planet that used to give him such a hard time. And it really made me uncomfortable because it seemed a lot like bullying that you might have seen at school.
Yeah.
And and he went with it because that was his secret. But I think they overdid that, and that was a weakness I saw.
Don't you think that was probably just a plot device to be? I mean, also in the same way, everybody's been making fun of the fact of, like, how do you not know the difference between Clark Kent and Superman if it's just a pair of glasses? I mean, it adds an extra, at least, dimension to be like, how could you picture this guy being the Man of Steel if he's a complete moron?
Henry Cavill tried to solve that, and didn't he walk around Times Square
With
no one recognized him?
In real life,
Yeah.
yes.
I think
and no one recognized him?
That works because Superman doesn't wear a mask, so you don't think he even has an identity, a secret identity. And it's like, of course you don't know him.
Yeah.
Of course you don't know him. Like, oh, you kind of look like him, but of course you couldn't be. Yeah.
Right.
There's a really rare,
works for him.
probably old story that I read where someone decided they were going to try and insert an idea why this works. And I don't think they've stuck with the mythology, but in this one story, they said that when he wears his glasses, he's using super hypnotism to cause anyone who looks him directly in the face to see something else.
Fantastic.
That's just one of those stories that's out there, just so you know.
85 years, folks, are not all bangers.
Yeah. He's like, well, this is like, he was talking to Professor X and he gave him some pointers.
Hypnotism.
Yeah. You said astigmatism, not hypnotism. Gotcha. All right. So that, I guess, we'd mentioned it. I was going to try to fill the gap there as far as, the video, the film medium, but I think 78's next. And 78's, well, we're going to talk probably mainly about two films as far as the two best ones, at least in our opinions. 78.
Yeah, the least said about Superman 4.
Yeah.
Quest for Peace, the best, the better.
I did like 3, though, weirdly, because I was young when it came out, but I
Check it out now. Yeah.
Oh, I know. But I'm saying I liked it at the time.
I loved Quest for Peace. I thought that was amazing when I was a kid.
Well, I didn't. That was the one where I knew
Nuclear Man.
It was a stinker, but
I will hurt people.
yeah.
No.
But I love Richard Pryor in 3, and he made it for me. I don't know why.
And Robert Vaughn is the bad guy.
Yeah.
Now, Robert Vaughn was one of my childhood heroes, and I hated to see him as a bad guy, so that's one reason I didn't like that.
Oh, but he's so good at it.
Yeah.
I don't remember those as well. Honestly, like, I've watched the first one. 78 is the one I've watched the absolute most, just because, I don't know, it's iconic. The soundtrack.
It was lightning in a bottle. The fact that it existed at that time with that director, with John Williams, with Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder. It's just,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where everything comes together.
She was a fantastic Lois. He was a fantastic Superman. Like, in the circles I run in, it's quoted all the time. Like, you're not the only person that says elevator's broken. I know a few people that say elevator's broken. It's awesome. It's my favorite thing ever.
And the original script was commissioned for Mario Puzo, who was coming off of The Godfather, to write. And apparently when Donner got the script, Donner was just a kid. He'd only done two movies. He just had a success with The Omen, but he was a huge Superman fan. They didn't know that. Warner's didn't know that. They just asked him. And he got the script, and he said it was just absolutely unreadable. So he rewrote it over the weekend, and he had something worth shooting there.
Also, Austin, the gentleman that you talked, he came in and he asked he's asking if it was a rumor, and Matt and I had both said that if anybody knows the answer to this, it would be you, Shayne. And that is it true that Brando was like highfalutin, like elitist, and he was just reading the lines off of a...
Oh, that is true. That is true.
That's true?
Yeah.
That's true for most of the movies that he made at that time. Same with them.
That's why he says Krypton?
Yeah, well, and
And
Superman, it was on the baby's diaper. They put his lines on the baby's diaper, so when he's holding the baby up, he's reading off the lines, and they did that because he refused to learn any of his lines. Either that or they put an earpiece in it.
yeah, same thing with Apocalypse Now next year.
Yeah.
That's the only way they could get him. But
I've heard that as well. Yeah.
But when you watch it now, because they did this, Marilyn Monroe, they did the same thing when she would open a drawer or look at a mirror. There'd be, but it's still, you can't argue with what's on screen. There's something there, and something with Brando's.
And I was going to say that
delivery.
two of my favorite parts in both that and Man of Steel is the Jor-El voiceover.
Yeah.
The scenes leading.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's incredible in 78, and then in Man of Steel,
It's great.
in Man of Steel, it's my favorite part of that entire movie. When he walks out, there's the light behind it with the cape. It's all, you know.
You'll give the people of Earth an idea to strive towards. Yeah, they're
Yes.
behind you. They're somewhere they'll fall. But in time, they were joining the sun.
Incredible.
In time,
Wonderful.
help them accomplish wonders. Yeah.
Don't you think we went to see those other Superman films, though? And we had young eyes, some of us did back then. But we saw them because we loved Christopher Reeve. What he did in that first movie, you can't beat
No,
it.
there's a
So I
shot.
wanted to follow him and see what he did, kind of like I watched Supergirl, even though I hated the show. The actress was so good, I wanted to watch her as Supergirl.
We can
Slater.
thank David Prowse for his bodybuilding,
Yes,
because Darth Vader actually trained Superman for the screen.
that's great.
Yeah,
trivia,
and that when that first wide shot where he's first in the outfit for the first time in 78, and it's a wide shot in the Fortress of Solitude, and he flies all the way from the back screen to the forescreen, and right when he goes over the camera, he banks. And that was something that he did on his own, because they said they kept shooting, and it just looked dumb. And then finally, Christopher Reeve had the idea to bank right before, and it was like, oh my gosh! And it's like, great, John Williams,
Brilliant.
It's fantastic. Just like at the end when he smiles at the camera before he flies off. It's like, oh my goodness gracious!
iconic. Yeah.
Was number 2? Was that where they did the transmutation where he lost all his powers?
Yes.
That's right. I have not seen that one for a while.
In the Fleischer cut.
Yeah.
The Fleischer cut. The Donner cut was different, but it still had Zod and
Yeah.
and then
If you're a big fan, don't forget to get the Donner cut of the first film where he
Yes.
rescues Miss Tessmacher from the pit of creatures.
the 3-hour
Yeah.
TV cut. Yeah,
It's incredible.
I mean, Gene Hackman. I mean, come on.
He's great.
as Lex.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
So my kids are just now. I just showed them 78 for the first time within the last few months.
cool.
Because and that was the way I've been doing it with my kids is I wait for them to ask me, because if I push it, I mean, I'll be watching this stuff, and if they sit down and they get interested, cool. But like, I found that I get a lot more traction if
You don't force it on
if
them.
I don't force it on them, right? I can't be like, it's Friday, it's family movie night, we're watching Superman 78. Turn off the phones and abandon your friends. I don't get much mileage out of that. So
You wait till their friends abandon them.
right,
It's like now it's movie
and then
time.
I'm just like, oh, so now
Oh,
Dad,
look who comes crawling back.
exactly. Like, go grab the Oreos.
Fine.
So, but yeah, then 78. Anybody else? Anything else as far as like,
Well,
I thought it was weird at the time that he turned back time by flying
yeah,
counter rotation to the Earth's spin. I thought that was, even when I was a kid, I was like, huh.
because everybody knows you have to fly the opposite way to turn back time.
Yeah.
It's just science. It worked for me. The reason that I think the 78 movie works so well is because everyone took it seriously. Richard Donner said the watchword on set was always verisimilitude. Like if we take the character seriously, then so will the audience, and it does come across. But again, if they had not gotten Christopher Reeve to play it, there's no movie there. He was Superman.
That made it, for me, it just made it twice as tragic when everything happened with him.
Yeah.
I remember
Robin Williams pay for all of his?
Yeah, they were best friends.
Yeah.
So
He paid for all of his
I think
physical
they're-
therapy, and he got him a bunch of his gear, and which is sad that if that happens to you, you have to turn to someone.
I was
to-
also pumped that he still took on roles after that.
Yeah.
Like, as
He was on Smallville.
he was on Smallville, exactly. That's what I'm referring to.
And I love DC for doing that. They recruit
Yes.
people from their old projects
Yep.
and use them again.
I can't even tell you, because Smallville is, I was going to bring it up later, but that meant a lot to me. It's relevant now that Reeves was in there, because he was the professor, right?
Yes.
And then he was still current, like.
Yeah.
But you also have to respect Reeves. Like, at one point, everybody views him as Superman, and it's got to be hard emotionally, everything he went through, to come back and do it at all, because I'm grateful because I have that forever, but it is Christopher Reeves still in all of his apparatus, you know what I mean? It's
Well,
for him, I imagine
if we're
it's
going to go on a
big
Reeves
difference.
tangent, I got to suggest "Noises Off" by Peter Bogdanovich and "Death Trap" by Sidney Lumet. But that we digress.
Are they? How are those before or after
Death Trap's
Superman?
great. I remember seeing that.
After he was a trained actor,
Yeah.
he could do Shakespeare. He was wonderful in everything. He just
Somewhere in Time.
But he also Somewhere
remember
in
that.
Time. Yeah, but I
favorite.
love how much he loved playing Superman too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he just seemed like.
And it shows the casting is so. I mean, it's like when you watch Lincoln and you're like, is he playing Lincoln or was Lincoln playing Daniel
him.
Day-Lewis
Right.
when he was alive? He just embodied the role so well.
He had that little whistle in his voice too.
Yeah.
So Christopher Reeve was a great actor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because he did so many good. Like I love that romance with Jane Seymour and Somewhere in Time. To me, that's like one of my favorite movies.
They filmed that up in Michigan, didn't they?
They filmed it at Mackinac Island.
Yeah, Mackinac.
It was just beautiful, that little story, and very low budget, but well done. And he was a great actor.
You've talked about that a few times. When my family was going up there on vacation, like, yo, Somewhere in Time was filmed up there. Yep.
And I think I told you the little anecdote, or maybe I told your wife. They were showing the premiere of the film after they had done it. They had the world premiere on the island. It's kind of a little nod to all the local people that had been cooperative and helped it go smoothly. And they were using equipment that had been there for many years, and there really wasn't a movie theater on the island. It was just a room where they would have an auditorium where they'd have meetings and special occasions, and they had set up a projector and was showing the film, and the sound went out. Oh, maybe 30 minutes into the movie, and everyone just winced, and it was such a sad second, for them all to realize, oh, we set up this big event, and it's going to go wrong. Christopher Reeve stood up, asked for a microphone, and narrated the rest of the film until they got the sound back on. What
That's
a
just
guy!
awesome.
Okay.
That's
great.
Super nice guy.
He is a Superman.
That's odd. Well, and that I think I was going to say that kind of it's the embodiment. Like that's where I was trying to go with the whole thing as far as him getting on Smallville later on, and like he was on there because he was Superman, and he was always loved the fact that he was, and everything you hear about him is he embodied a lot of the qualities that Superman had.
So if we all agree that he's the best, who do you think is the second best Superman actor, live action or otherwise?
Christopher Reeves.
Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill?
Cavill for me. I mean, I don't think Brandon Routh was bad.
No, Brandon Routh was fine.
I think he had
Cavill's
a bad script.
I think Cavill's much better presence. I say that because Brandon Routh was very good in Legends of Tomorrow, but that's because he fits the screen.
Palmer.
Whereas if Henry Cavill was on Legends of Tomorrow, you couldn't contain all that charisma.
But he also did play in that crossover. He put him in the Superman suit again. He played the Superman he was in. That was cool.
Kingdom Come Superman was cool.
Yeah.
The coolest part about that movie, I always thought, was when it was the bank robbers that had the minigun and they shoot him and you watch him get shot in the eye.
That was incredible.
That still sticks with me.
Because that's the thing. The reason why it was striking is like when you think about it, you're like, well, yeah, of course, but that you didn't think about that specifically until you actually saw it. Because remember when the trailer hit, I was like, oh dear God, yes. Why wouldn't his eyes be bulletproof? But it's
as far as nefarious schemes go, though, Lex Luthor's like big real estate. I mean, like everybody's going to want to live on these like cold, nondescript, rocky things in the middle of the ocean. Like, I don't think you thought this out, Lex.
it was so bad. Parker Posey was my favorite part of that.
Yeah, she was great.
Yeah.
It was good. One of the things, though, about these liking a super actor better than others, they all have their place. Because even though, as a boy, I knew that George Reeves didn't really resemble the guy in the comic books with the little curl on the forehead, he maybe looked more like an older brother or a neighbor. For that time period, it kind of matched like maybe what a Joe Shuster drawing would look like.
The aesthetic was the same as far as that.
And so as time has gone on and Kurt Swan has drawn and other artists have drawn Superman and portrayed him in a different way, these other actors fill into those blanks.
Yeah, I always like seeing different aspects of the character. I still lament that we never got the Nick Cage Tim Burton movie. I'll stand by that.
I think
it would have been
would've
odd,
been-
but it would have been something new, something different that we'd still talk about. Chris Rock as Jimmy Olsen, forget about it.
That seems, I mean,
You know who was going to be Lex Luthor?
no.
Kevin Spacey. That never changed. He stuck around.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
So that still happened.
I saw like the screen test stuff. That's the only thing I've ever seen of it. Is like I showed him in
looked
the.
cool.
Yeah, I don't.
It was very early aughts, the costume. It was very early aughts.
It was like very shiny. It looked like a metallic Funko Pop.
Yeah.
That's what he looked like. So, but no, I'm all about it. Like I've also gotten more of an appreciation for Nicolas Cage and more recently than I did then. So I think
everybody did.
back then I was like, what? And now I'd be like, oh man, that'd be so great. Do you feel that same way, Shane, or were you always?
I've always been a big Nick Cage fan, and I still remain so to this day. That guy can do high art, he can do adaptation, he can do Moonstruck, and then he can do Face Off, and it's all the same. And now all he's doing is straight-to-video work mostly, and then every once in a while he's going to make an Oscar-winning film.
Dude, he made the best.
No one does Nick Cage like Nick Cage.
He made the best Bond movie too, The Rock.
Could be a great last Bond movie.
Yeah.
But Henry Cavill was great. I would not want to fill those shoes. That's for sure. No. Tim Daly was great in both Superman the Animated Series and Wings. So
Really?
Yeah.
He's underrated. That's very true.
a lot of Wings fans.
And so specifically Man of Steel, to jump to that one, did you guys, I mean, the big thing, I guess, the only controversy around that entire thing was, were you okay with him snapping Zod's neck?
Yes.
Yes?
He should have done it earlier.
He done it in the comics.
If anything, he should have done it as soon as he saw
Before
that
they
Zod
leveled.
wasn't going to stop, and as soon as he saw that Zod was going to like kill until he was stopped. Superman would have just done that.
I think that was a Byrne issue, wasn't it, when he did that?
Yeah.
So I'd already seen it.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people,
Superman doesn't kill.
yeah, Superman doesn't kill. So there was like, I remember hearing,
Yeah, the internet
whisperings
has.
of
They'd already done that in the comic world.
Yeah.
There was
We'd already seen that argument.
the scene where Jonathan Kent dies is my thing because he's
He
having
just
an argument.
disappears into
No. I like that, but the argument that precedes it, the only thing is like he's clearly he's having a fight and he's like, "You're not even my real dad" or something like that. He's clearly supposed to be a teenager.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and he looked like he was 35.
And I think they should have just got a teenage actor for that, and then it kind of would have changed a lot. But that's my only big issue. That and when
Instead, it looks like an indignant 40-year-old Superman.
yeah, like goodness, like it's clearly supposed to be a teenager. Yeah, that and I do. I mean, he would have taken people away. Even starting out, I think he would have gotten away from Metropolis sooner before they leveled the city. But on the whole, I think Man of Steel is a great film. I love the Jor-El.
They have never cast live action Jor-El wrong.
Yeah.
And the
Between Russell Crowe and Kevin Costner as your parents, who are they going to get for this next movie?
Diane Lane's my favorite.
Oh my,
Martha.
Yes. And Ayelet Waldman as a mother as Krypton.
Yeah. But what I really appreciated about the Man of Steel were the kid elements, as far as like the quiet moments with Costner where he's like, "What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?" And he's like, "I don't know, maybe." Like, it just felt like very real moments where he's trying to teach him, that whole humanity aspect, but he also fully recognizes that he doesn't have all the answers. He just knows that they have a problem as far as like, you can do these things, and he's conflicted. For a moment, if you will, picking them up off the side of the road as a child and like hiding the ship and all of that, that's already got to be pretty nerve-wracking every single day, being like, does somebody know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh man.
if you think about the reality of that, like every day I'd wake up and be like, oh shit, is today the day?
Or when he gets pushed down and instead of
Grabs the fence.
ripping them into two pieces, he just
Squeezes the fence.
goes home and
He
hits
gets
a pillow.
and he gets made fun of in that broom closet. Everybody's like picking on him.
I love that.
I loved
not
it.
knowing what to do, and then of course they call his mom, and she centers him, and it's a great moment. It's a movie made with great moments.
Absolutely, and that was the thing. And you'll find out later on in my list. I appreciate those aspects of the Superman stories rather than the
Is Zod every bit as menacing as Terrence Stamp?
yes. What? His Zod? Is
yeah.
what? Oh, his Zod is okay. I'm sorry, I got you. You're talking about what's his name? I forget.
Terrence Stamp.
Not the original one. Yes, I'm talking. I thought you were
Michael
comparing.
Shannon.
Yes, there it
was.
is. Sorry.
Yeah, we're gonna keep all this.
Yeah. No. I wasn't sure. Like, I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
And the idea that he might be back.
Yes.
So at time of recording.
Because he definitely is in Flash at least.
Yeah.
So that's the good news.
That's what I mean.
It's awesome. So, from there, I do want to touch on Smallville. It is a little bit. I mean, it's another TV show, and it was more recent. But, Rick, I know you appreciate the CW stuff. I don't know. I mean, Matt, I don't think you or Shane have talked about it much, so I don't know if you actually view it or not. But Smallville was special to me in the sense that it was very episodic and monster of the week, but they did cover some ground as far as like Doomsday wasn't Doomsday, right? But I do like the actor because it's the guy that does the animated version of Maul. I'm trying to remember that actor's name.
Peter Serafinowicz?
No, he does it in the Clone Wars. The guy that does the Darth Maul voice. He also played the character in
Sam Witwer.
Sam Witwer. Yep, Sam Witwer was Doomsday in the CW Smallville show, and he was like an EMT. Like, do you remember that? I figured that's why I was meant to at least ask you because of the whole thing. Like, what did you think about that whole bit?
Loved it. Yeah.
I mean, it was so, and I liked that, it was like the red blue blur and all of that. So it was cool. And because that was, as far as exposure goes, like Pete, it was awesome seeing that he had a friend, like that was my first exposure. I mean, as far as like, diving deep into the whole Pete Ross and all that stuff was
What I had
Smallville, right?
In Adventure Comics when I was growing up. Yeah.
Right.
Superboy. Yeah.
But I mean, I saw that first and then was reading more because I didn't bother. I mean, I didn't bother with older Superman stuff.
Sure.
Until I had started watching Smallville, which that's old at this point. But I'm saying out there, I guess, is I'm giving an endorsement. Like Smallville is good. You're not going to it's not going to change your life, but it's very entertaining. It went on for a while. I mean, I like the casting of Lex. I like the casting of Clark.
Great interpersonal relationships were shown on the show. I mean, realistic kind of friendships, and that added depth to it.
And they do some teasing of Justice League because Aquaman does. I mean, and pretty much the fun part about watching Smallville is you will recognize every single actor because they went on to do something possibly else DC. Because Aquaman in Smallville is actually
Reacher.
Hawk. He's Jack Reacher, but he was Hawk in Titans.
That's right. Yeah.
So it goes all over the place. It's a lot of fun. So that's my Smallville endorsement for a fun show. If you have access to it, it's a good watch.
And can I jump ahead a few decades to, or a decade to Lois and Superman and Lois, the CW show that's on right now? It's the best thing on the CW right now as far as adventure shows.
I've heard good things. Tyler Hitchson is a good Superman.
Oh, the relationship between he and Lois and their sons, it's touching. I mean, it sometimes can choke you up. It's very much like you would think it would be, if you were right there in real life, watching them talk and listening to them talk. I mean, and hearing the different things that are going on in their lives. It's very, very well done.
Mine was, so you had the Superman one. Mine growing up, where I actually watched it in real time in release, was Lois and Clark with Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher. That was the one that
I like Terry Hatcher.
I thought it was fantastic. I loved it. Like
I did too.
Growing up,
I like Dean Cain a lot. For some reason, the costume or some of the special effects didn't grab me at the time, but I didn't care because Dean was so good.
I like the way it was played out. It felt kind of X-Files as far as the will they, won't they, until they. I mean, it was good chemistry, I think, between the two. As far as it was fun, just following them around and the storyline.
Must see TV in my house. So
Yep.
I never missed an episode.
Of all the episodes or all the series that there's been, I think it's the only one that didn't end. It just kind of they canceled it and
Yeah. After
very
4 seasons.
disappointing. Yeah.
Yep.
That and the John Wesley shit Flash were just great to watch those when I was a kid.
Oh my God, I loved that so much.
great to
Which
watch.
that's another one.
Mark
Mad
Hamill
props. They brought him back because he's in the new Flash series.
He's
It's
Golden
awesome.
Age Flash, essentially.
Yeah,
DC's the greatest for that.
for sure.
DC's the
They're
greatest.
loyal to their people, and Supergirl had a role as the lab leader at the opposing
Helen
lab.
Slater?
Yeah, Helen Slater.
Yep. That can do. Actually, that can be a decent segue into. So we'll talk about the future of films. And the next one, we're getting the James Gunn is going to be the first film that comes out of this new universe. It is a Superman film, and it is supposedly, it's taking inspirations for from a few different stories. But I wanted to take the opportunity for each of us to kind of discuss the favorite comic book storylines or special issues and stuff like that. To get things going. And did you say chronologically it makes sense for you, Shayne, to go before we can go that way? You want to go first with your number?
Oh, well, we still touch on the Death and Returns because that was such a big.
Yeah, we can do
Big
that too.
part.
So yeah, we'll do that first as far as the comics, then we can go to our own list. Yeah. Well, I've already told my story. I've got one of my favorite, probably top 3 childhood memories involves the death of Superman, and that was my dad skipping work to make sure I got my black bag copies. I'll never forget it. It's like I said, one of my favorite memories of all time. Like that, he went to my store that I had growing up He took the day off and got it. He wouldn't let me skip school, but he got the issues for me. And I remember his car was parked in the parking lot or in our driveway when I got home. I walked in. I remember I knew something was weird, but I didn't put it together that maybe he was out shopping for me. And I walk in and he's got 2 copies and he's like, I know you need 2 because you're going to want to open one up and the other one you're not going to touch, because he respected the collector that had already been born. One of my favorite memories of all time. I mean, I'll talk about the book beyond that, but I mean, where were you guys at? I mean, you probably know where you're at or what you were doing at the time.
1992, Groove is in the heart. Newsies has taken the country by storm, making us all get up and dance, and Superman died saving the world from a giant punching monster, which
a bone spurred.
It was DC's answer to the new kids at Image, and what are you gonna do to move books? And they did indeed move books. Whether or not it succeeded ultimately, that's I still love it, even if it isn't the greatest conceit or the greatest idea. But as far as me, I was following all 4 lines,
which were Adventures of Man of Steel, regular Superman, and
Action.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And of course, Steel, Eradicator, Cyborg Superman, and Superboy.
Yep.
Don't call me Superboy. Yes. And I do remember like the lead up, and because it was my Justice League, and then it did bring out moments of heroism and other characters like Booster Gold going one-on-one with Doomsday for maybe a panel and a half.
And getting wrecked.
But it shows a different side of him that we hadn't seen before. And then I would say, like, it would have been a great opportunity when Superman was gone to see if the other heroes could, like, try to fill that gap. And they did that to an extent, but not as much as it was more about the other Superman.
I agree. Look, in retrospect, I feel like the thing I remember is the wasted opportunity, because what they did is they took the 4 Supermen that ended up being nothing. Mm-hmm. Instead of having, they were filling in all the gaps instead of all the heroes that obviously were.
Right. And it did have a couple really, and also the way he came back, it was kind of like a shrug. Like, does anybody know how he came back? Like, he went into some sort of Kryptonian coma, a crypto coma, and that's all he really was.
I just had to recharge my batteries.
I called it hibernation. Yes.
Yeah. It was the sleep in return of Superman.
What were you doing, Matt?
A long nap in return.
I was a junior that year in high school.
Did you bother getting the book, or were you no?
No, I was not in a good place, and I didn't have support for that kind of stuff. So I had missed, I wouldn't say all the books from then, but I missed most of them. And then I went back and reread it, but I was not there that day, or I wasn't there at that point in my life.
I was in middle school, and it was blowing my mind.
Yeah, it was all.
I was working in the comic shop.
Wow.
See, so you were working that day?
Yeah, I was helping sell it. Yeah.
All right, tell that story. That's got to be insane, right?
I mentioned before, I think we touched on this briefly. There was a line down the street, several blocks long of people, single file, waiting to get the comic. And
buying 5, 10. Did you guys have limits and stuff? Or
we had to, because we didn't anticipate. We knew it would be popular. We had no idea it would be that popular.
So Matt and I have talked about this before. Imagine being those jackasses that bought 10 copies.
Yeah.
That's why we did a little bit better, because some of the neighboring communities that had some.
I can't say that I blame them. You never know.
No, you don't.
You never know.
They didn't.
Especially today, with the amount of books that we have to order now.
Yeah.
If something blows up, it is so easy to miss it. It's so easy to lose.
Yeah.
Whatever importance it is in the ordering process, and you just have to get lucky sometimes. But
I think that's why I may have been a little valuable at that particular store, because the people that ran it weren't comic people.
You had to let them know the Superman guys actually.
They had hired me as a comic guy to come in and tell them what to order and how much to get. And I had read, I think I've mentioned to you guys personally, that I had read the original Death of Superman, 30 years earlier, and knew that was one of the greatest comics I had ever read. Mm-hmm. And I just had a funny feeling that this was going to be DC stepping up to the plate really big time and, jumping off of that same exciting point. So I told him to order hundreds, and we were lucky and had plenty.
And it was Dan Jurgens who created my beloved Booster Gold. Also, I mean, like the Death and Return of Superman, that's where Coast City got destroyed and drove Hal crazy, and he became Parallax. And that was the 10-year thing. It had a long repercussions. But the bigger thing that came out of Death and Return of Superman, before that, they killed Barry and they'd killed Supergirl in the Crisis.
Yeah.
And at that time, they were still dead. But after the Death and Return of Superman, they started just killing their characters left and right. Ollie gets killed. Ted Kord gets killed. It's just kind of like, ultimately, I think it just like lessens the impact of death in comics after you kill Superman. Like, where else do you go? And
Especially if they don't stay dead.
yeah, and then when you bring him back. So I love the story at the time, and I still do. But that's I don't know if like long term impact. I don't know if it's if we netted positive there.
I don't think so. Mine, like I've said this before. I mean, the reason why I didn't put it on my list is what it means to me. Like that story about my dad in that time period of my life, and me being so just completely into comics. Is like what, that was what was going on,
it's
and
more
that's where it holds its
than it is
place.
good.
However, I have talked about it, and we have talked about it. Is in 75. The layout in that book is very cool, how it gets to be less and less and less panels.
Yeah.
Like, it was very clever until it hits that spread at the end.
It's coming. It's getting closer. It's getting more impactful.
And then that last panel where Lois is holding him.
Superman died, and you fold it out, and
she's like crying. Like I legit cried when I got to that point. And I remember being like, I didn't know what to think. I mean, I didn't want to think it was going to be a forever thing or any amount of time. But I also remember the return books. I was the wrong age to handle it. I was impatient. Like every single book that came out that he wasn't in, I would get pissed. I'm like, ugh, well, this isn't the one. Although Eradicator was my favorite design.
I love he was my favorite, and I do like that we got John Wesley Irons out of it. The one character.
A great Shaq movie.
Oh yeah.
Well, and they keep Crenshaw. I've seen Crenshaw recently.
No, yeah, Hank Henshaw had been
sorry,
like in the league. I mean, yeah, he's still around. But John or Steele is
Dawn of DC book coming out in September or something.
Gonna be awesome.
Around the same time as the Wonder Woman book.
Steele even has his own legacy character now. So, a niece.
What's she? Naomi or something?
No, it's a I don't know her name, but
I'll look it up. You guys just keep spending some time, fill some space. I can look it up.
One thing about Steel is that it taught me something that I had not grown up with, and that is there's a whole legend of John Henry Irons. Like,
oh yeah,
and somehow I'd missed that in my life.
I went really hard into American folk heroes when I was a kid. So him, Johnny Appleseed, Paul Bunyan, Calamity Jane, Pecos Bill, and John Henry Irons was just
one of those.
Yeah.
Well, it taught me that I had missed that one, and so I was able to go back. And now I see really a lot of references to it. I
mean, they gave him the large hammer,
Yeah, because
he beat a steam engine in one of them.
It is being written actually by Michael Dorn, who is Worf, and his niece's name is Natasha. That's the name. I knew it was an N name or some sort, but yeah.
Cool.
That is Dorn. So Steel Works is what it's called. It's coming out in... I don't know. Soon, along with the rest of this stuff. Yeah, because there's already
anything farther away than 3 months, though, they're not going to have.
Yeah, but
dates locked down.
The A cover is a Clay Mann cover, so that alone's worth picking it up. So that should be a good time.
Now I'm ready to dive in.
Go ahead. No, I mean I'm honestly.
Is it time to mention the old story, or are we saving that for later?
No, we can.
Because in the old story, one of the things that I thought was cool that was
the old death,
the original death.
Well, we can go into the list because that's on your list, right?
It's on my list. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then we can start it off with you if you want to go on your, or do we need to go to you, Shayne?
No, it doesn't
actually. Okay.
I've got like 8 or so different stories that might be too much for what we're trying to do here.
Just do the death one for the comparison, and we'll move on in the list after that.
November 1961, I went back and looked it up because I was afraid I wouldn't have the facts. Jerry Siegel decided we're going to kill Superman.
Okay.
And he's with Kurt Swan, who's fantastic, the seminal Superman artist of the Silver Age. And they crafted a story where Luthor got the upper hand and actually killed Superman. And so in this one comic, which had 3 chapters, they had the conflict and the death, and then they had the funeral, and then they had Supergirl accept the role of that she was always trained for in the original Silver Age comics, is to replace Superman. She was the hero in training all along, and at the end of the story, she became Supergirl, the Superwoman, the person who was going to take over and serve justice. And Superman was dead. That was the end of the story. So that's why it had an impact to me as a child. He didn't come back because it was meant to be a standalone, what we used to call imaginary stories, which
like an Elseworlds type thing.
what we call Elseworlds now, but back
Yeah.
then they didn't have that term. And it was just, a shock. You went to the newsstand, picked up your latest Superman, and he was killed. And it blew everybody's mind as, our
So did
neighborhood.
they ever give any designation back then that it was like an imagination story,
They
or
would
was
write-
it, or was
they
it
would
just
write an imaginary tale on the cover as a blurb,
okay? So they did actually indicate that was the case.
but you never knew what that meant. Did that mean Crypto was going to die, or you didn't know what was going to happen inside?
Right.
It could be anything. He could get married and have kids. Sometimes that would happen.
Sure. Did you like those more or less?
Well, in this case, it was mind blowing. It was one of the best comics I ever read in my life up to that point. It was fantastic. But there were stinkers in there. They would do occasionally things that,
Like he finds a unicorn.
stuff that didn't make a lot of sense, and they were filling time, because you got to crank out a book every month. But this was one that was, Jerry Siegel took, this is his character, and he took the time to write a really great story, and Kurt Swan is an incredible artist. And
So with that, they didn't even need to bother to explain him coming back. They were like, that was just an imaginary
He was
story.
just back
The next
because it was
issue
a regular monthly issue.
Yeah.
So they did that kind of thing occasionally back then, and this was the best one that I can remember. So I just wanted to make sure people knew that there was a Death of Superman. It was one issue, 3 chapters, excellent book.
That just seems weird now. I mean, because if it were happening in 2023 for us, Matt, that would have been a one shot
Yeah.
that didn't interrupt anything
Yep.
with the standalone, because people would be like, wait a minute, you don't do this to my, Action 1073 can't be some
Just think about
imaginary
that.
tale.
The 149th issue of his own book, he was killed.
That's
just strange to think about.
yeah. And Shayne, coincidentally, you have an issue that's very close to that, do you not?
Yeah, it's my number 1.
Then we'll wait then.
We will wait.
Okay.
Yeah, but I if we're going 5 to 1, I can dive into my number 5, which is Superman for all seasons. To get it started, it's Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, who unfortunately passed last year. It was Jeff Loeb. It was not his first DC work, obviously. That was Challenge of the Unknown. But he was coming off of, I think the year before he had done
Long Halloween.
Long Halloween, yeah. And now he's taking on Superman. I mean, just the guts on this guy. But so that was 98, was for all seasons. And it takes it's 4 oversized issues, each one going from taking a season. So it starts at spring, summer, fall, and winter, and it's great because like spring is when his powers manifest. It's when he first becomes starts to become Superman in earnest. But the thing about the series itself that I like so much is so to me one it puts Lana Lang as essentially his high school sweetheart, his first love, and we forget that like everybody has the love of their life, but you also have that girl that you dated for like 2 years in high school that you still think about sometimes. And like Lana Lang is that for Clark. She's not the love of his life, but like late night, had a few drinks, he's going through Facebook, he'll look at her.
Sure.
But it's also like you got to think like Superman is not he doesn't just he has to spend 24 hours saving everybody, but this is a guy who also took a full-time job, a high-stress 9-to-5 job, and he does it. And he's not late. He collects a paycheck. He pays taxes. And then he's also like, then I have to like stop a volcano in Samoa. I don't know if there's volcanoes in Samoa. Don't at me. But like, this is a series of like, that doesn't happen. Like they don't show anything like that. But that is the spirit of the character in this thing. It's like, yeah, this is a guy from Kansas doing his best. Like just if you were a Midwestern guy raised on a farm, and then you moved to the big city and got a job as a reporter at like the Times, you're already doing something amazing.
Yeah.
And he's Superman.
Well, and if you're anybody else, that means the difference between leaving 5 minutes early for work or 45 minutes early.
He takes the subway.
Right.
He gets coffee for the office, and also I do like just as a narrative too. Each season is narrated by. It's never narrated by Clark. It's always narrated by either Lana, Lois, Pa, or Lex in each of the 4 seasons. So it's you get their point of view of this character.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a really great series for anybody who's not read it. Pick it up and trade.
Yep.
You won't regret it.
For all seasons. All right. Matt, do you have a number 5?
I didn't really put them in number, but we can do that.
Okay.
I
don't have mine numbered either, but I'm just going to wing it.
Until the current run, the Super Sons run of, was it Volume 4, 2016? That was the first I guess, mainline Superman book that I really liked. And I liked the introduction of his son, and I liked and then him and Bruce's son get together.
Right.
And it's just some great storytelling, and it felt, I don't know, it felt hopeful, and it was the most hopeful I've read a Superman book in a while.
And it wasn't just how John and Damian played off each other, but then you got to see how Clark and Bruce's parenting styles,
the dynamics of the four of them.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was great. I love Super Sons.
I love it, and I love everything's come out of it since then.
Yeah,
Is that the only time that you felt that Damien was likable?
Pretty much.
I like
pretty much. I don't.
that is where I started to like him.
That was, I'm asking. I just know he's always said
hated him
that,
before
like,
up to then. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just he's not my favorite Robin. He's probably my least favorite Robin. So it is what it is.
his regular mainline series that focused on him was pretty cool because the entire book was just a fighting tournament, which he's fine and dandy if that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like he's pretty cool in that way. So okay, so Super Sons. That's 100% valid.
Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason's
Doing work.
Yes, they are. They were.
I didn't know that Gleason did that.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I didn't really put them in order either, but I at least want to mention another. It's an Alan Moore story. Dave Gibbons on art, came out June 5th, 1985. It was in Superman Annual. It was the story for A Man Who Has Everything.
Oh,
so
that's fantastic.
my first exposure, admittedly, was Justice League cartoon because they actually did this story where it was. I remember, and it's really funny because there's the little scene where Diana had bought him something really thoughtful, and Batman's walking in next to her, and she's like, "You didn't give him a gift card, did you?" Because he's like, cash, like this disappointed thing. Like it was just funny. Like they care, but it was just it was a funny Bruce moment. And then they walk in, and there's like he's got the parasite attached to him. The whole Mongol thing goes from there. And I didn't know until after I had seen that it was actually based on an Alan Moore short story or in the Superman Annual. What number was it? 11 or was it number?
Sounds right.
So, yeah, that one is a fantastic story. It's called For the Man Who Has Everything, and it's based upon like the parasite that goes onto it puts you kind of in a coma, and it puts you like in this state where you're like living this life where everything's perfect, and that it's
That's
basically
how it beats you.
Yes, and that's how it beats you. So the reason why I identified with it when I noticed it later, and I always make reference to it, it was basically the Matrix, the premise of the Matrix. Alan Moore had written it in 1985, more or less, or at least similarities
Greatest comics writer of all time.
And so that's my number 5. I mean,
He'll pop up again later.
yes,
There's
but
a little alien element there too with the
yeah,
creature.
no, for sure. But like it was just it was it's the only example on my list where one of the shows came first, which led me to find out that the book was the inspiration. But the animated series, like Justice League Unlimited and all of those, they were all fantastically written, and I loved those. Like, I think they did the portrayal of the characters properly, and a lot of times they drew inspiration from the books themselves, which is a lot of fun because you could always watch that, and then you'd have somewhere to go, and that was how I arrived at this book. So,
What's interesting is it's so beloved.
yeah,
That story of Superman fans. They even did it on Supergirl and did it halfway decent.
they just transferred it.
Yeah, they just instead of Superman, it was Supergirl that had it happen.
Okay,
There wasn't a Mongol,
right.
But there was a character that made it similar.
Okay, well that's cool. I didn't know that.
And to see it live action, that was kind of
Yeah, that'd be trippy. Yeah, for sure. We can do. You can go back to you if you want to talk about something else, Rick.
Well, I don't know why I keep picking these stories about Superman in deadly danger for his life, but another great one. It's called The Last Days of Superman from the Silver Age, and I'm talking about. I have my list of 8 or so books that I was fond of. They're all from the 60s, like 1960, 1961, so kind of old and hard to find, but you maybe can find them in a collection. The Last Days of Superman is a story about America sending one of our first satellites into orbit, and the astronaut gets in danger, and there's a foreign object that's in the orbital path, and he's going to collide with it. And they get the word Superman, and he takes off and gets there just in time to I think he takes the booster rocket that was falling or something, or he had just found it, recovered it from the sea, and uses it to throw this item out of the path of the astronaut. But as he's doing that, he sees that it has Kryptonian writing on it, and it has a glow as if it might be kryptonite or embedded with kryptonite. So when he knocks it out of orbit, he tries to steer it toward a place where he can go and investigate it. And I think he ends up taking Jimmy with him, or Jimmy follows him there, and they discover this. It's kind of like a sarcophagus or a box with an unusual shape, and it has Kryptonian writing on it, and it definitely is kryptonite. Once he gets close to it, he realizes it's kryptonite. He has to stay back, and he lets Jimmy go over to it. And Jimmy says, it looks like it has latches and things. I mean, this looks like it, may have been a part of a ship, or, it got into orbit by being dropped out of some vessel or something. And so he opens it up, and unfortunately, the wind is blowing towards Superman, and there's some cloud that is released from this thing.
Unfortunately, the wind is blowing towards Superman.
And he's exposed. I'm not sure if it's even drawn, but they describe it as there's movement from the box towards Superman.
Is it like powdered kryptonite or something?
It's not something, if I remember right, it's been many, many years, obviously, but I don't think there's a visual. It's just a description like, oh, I'm downwind and something's coming out of the box, or there's a fume or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, shortly thereafter, he figures out a way to pile drive it into the deep earth and destroy it, or bury it so that it's not visible or able to be accessed by criminals to use against him. And as he's taking Jimmy back home, he becomes quite ill rather rapidly. And over a period of the first chapter, he becomes almost critically ill. And they realize, once he's gotten an interpretation of the markings that he had seen on there, that it was a scientific experiment that had gotten into space somehow. Maybe they were ejecting it from the planet to protect the citizens, and it had somehow migrated and followed the path of his ship to Earth's orbit. And so he's exposed to a deadly virus called Virus X from Krypton, and it's going to kill him. So, you spend a couple of chapters dealing with his declining health and looking like he's going to die, and they reach out and try and, But first, he goes out. He realizes he's quite sick, and he goes and visits Batman and Robin. To me, this is really touching. He meets him on top of police headquarters in Gotham, and he says, you guys are great friends, and we've teamed up and had a lot of great adventures together, and I appreciate you, what you do, and I appreciate your friendship, and I always think of us as the very best of friends, and I hope you feel that way too. And he just leaves, and as he leaves, they show him kind of wavering in his flight path, and Batman and Robin look at that and say, what's wrong? Is something wrong? He's dying. He's going around trying to make contact with all of his friends before he goes. It's very, very touching. And even though it's a simple, old-fashioned comic, it's very, very touching how they did it, how it was written. And they reach out to the Legion of Superheroes and says, is there anything in the future you can use to help him? He looks like he's not going to make it. And they can't find anything, and they contact various scientists in the Justice League. None of them can come up with anything. Supergirl finally decides to go back in time and try and find when this was released from Krypton. And she observes from a distance and sees and overhears with her super hearing that this is something that they had figured out. The solution was to disable it before they sent it off into space, but they just didn't want it on the planet anymore. And so when she gets back, there's a secret that's revealed as to why he's so sick. I'm not sure I should reveal it because it's a very interesting little tidbit. But once that problem is solved, he's back to his normal strength and everything's taken okay. But you go through a journey for 3 chapters in the Superman book. Again, it's just a one-issue thing. But you think Superman's dying, and it's very well written. What I liked more than the fact that he was dying was that he made contact with these people that were important to him, and had some moments that, as a fan, you'd love to see. So
yeah, that's awesome.
I think it's a great book.
It sounds kind of.
It's called The Last Day of Superman, or Last Days of Superman.
That's cool. And what year about? Did you say that was?
I think it was about 60 or 61.
That's awesome. Cool.
Firmly in that Silver Age. I've read that. That's a good story.
Are you
Shayne, we're on you.
Shayne? Yeah, number 4.
Mine is 1978's Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
Oh yeah.
By Neil Adams, mostly. It's a story by Dennis O'Neil, but it was Neil Adams wrote it.
I've never read it. Interestingly enough,
Man, wrote it, did the art. the crowds full of celebrities. I think.
Oh, yeah, I
Carter
forgot
and the
about that.
Beatles are in there. Yeah, and it was after Ali's comeback, so it was after Thrilla in Manila, Rumble in the Jungle. He was the reigning heavyweight champion of the world, and it was for charity. They were going to have a boxing match between Superman and Ali.
So that's the entire premise of the book is
Yes,
they're gonna
yes.
box for charity.
Yes,
Okay.
and,
Neil
and
Adams.
they go to a place with a red sun, so Superman is
Okay.
he's equally powered with Ali, and so Ali wins.
Right. Exactly.
He's Muhammad Ali. You just can't get with it. And then hijinks ensue. Eventually, like there's a greater, more villainous villain that they have to team up and fight against, and it is just an absolute blast. It's like 70-ish page issue. It's oversized. It's terrific. It's the most fun you'll have reading a comic about Superman fighting heavyweight champion.
The only version I've physically seen is that giant, exaggerated, like the 3-foot books, whatever.
Yeah.
Treasury
Is that
size.
the Treasury? Is that the only size it came in?
No.
What's the only size I ever saw?
Oh, I've got a hardcover that's a little bit smaller, a little bit more manageable, but yeah, they're all huge though.
That's cool.
What else are you gonna
On
do?
release date, I think it was only Treasury though, right?
Yeah, and I mean there's pages. The pages, the breakdowns of just Neil Adams showing the two fighting without dialogue. It's just
It's awesome.
The man's art is incredible. So seek that one out.
I definitely. Do you know if that one's on the app or anything like that? As far as
I'd be surprised if it wasn't. It's so iconic.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Awesome. Matt.
Okay,
4.
we're going to go back to 2003. It's an Elseworlds appearance. Dave Johnson and Mark Millar, and it's Red Sun.
Yep.
3 issues from June to August of 2003.
Terrific.
And it literally, to me, it upset the apple cart with Superman because he has always been the red, white, and blue, Boy Scout.
Truth, justice, the American way.
Yeah. So he, instead of landing in Kansas, he lands in the middle of Russia in the 1950s. And that's when it starts in the 1950s. And it just...
Height of the Cold War.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
It's a take.
Such
for
a
sure.
great, simple idea. I can't believe nobody had it.
Right.
no, once you think about it, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I should have done that years ago. But it's fantastically told. It's only 3 issues, but it totally takes everything about Superman and turns it on its head.
Because I had that exact same story. I'd come up with it, but instead it was like he landed in California and he just had frosted tips. That was the difference.
I do like the design.
surfing.
Well, the Batman in that story is awesome in Red Sun. How that's
Yes.
what we send, and then the design of Green Lantern in Red Sun is one of my favorite takes on Lantern.
Just the costume is menacing.
But like just
even
how
the
he was
adjustments
our like boy in blue.
Yeah.
He was our propaganda machine. Commies can do propaganda like nobody. So
Oh, yeah.
They put him front and center, and it was awesome. What a great.
It's
But they also showed that, like, just from him landing in Russia instead of the United States, like the prosperity that followed
Yeah.
Russia was amazing.
They become the dominant superpower. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I only saw the animated version. I didn't read the comic, but the animated version was very, very well told. And what I loved about it is it showed that Superman, though he ended in a different country and grew up with different values, still had personal values that were different, and he saw there was problems, and he
Yeah.
wanted to make a change. And I love that.
But that's the cool through line between it, because then you could say, yes, it's true that his parents loved him enough to send him off planet. Of course, that's what you would do. They saved his life and sent him home to Earth. And then there's the Kents that raised him, and their value system was part of it. But Red Sun was like confirming, like it's also who he is, right? And that was a cool part about that's a neat aspect for sure. And I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. That'll bring it to, I guess, me.
Yep.
It's my turn. I've talked about it before as I think a Batman book, but it is equal parts a Superman book for me. And that is the double date issue of Batman of 37. Came out December 20th, 2017. And I actually, one thing that because I bothered to look into the actual information this time, and I know why, part of the reason why it sticks with me so hard is it's a Tom King Clay Man matchup on that one. So Clay Man was on the art. He's one of my favorite artists working right now. So that's part of the impact for sure. But you've heard me talk about it before. Date Night is Double Date is a single issue. And the whole premise is like it starts off with like Clark with Lois talking about Batman, like, oh gee, isn't he just like a great guy? Like what a like talking about how he respects him and appreciates him separately. And then Selena and Bruce are separately getting ready to like go on a date or whatever. And, Selena and like Lois cook up this plan, like, oh, we'll have a double date. And Bruce is like, oh, no way. And then, but, Clark's very much more agreeable, which is, very much his voice. Anyway, they show up and they go to this carnival. And the whole thing with the carnival is you have to have a costume. Well, they didn't know that. They were all dressed really nice, like in suits and things like that. But Bruce drove, and he just happens to have costumes for everybody. But it would be too on the nose if they wore their own costume. So Bruce is wearing the Superman costume, and Clark is wearing the Batman costume. Which in costume they look very like the only difference is like
the chin.
It's one of them is clean shaven and the other one has like stubble.
Yeah, and
that's how that's the visual difference, which is hilarious to begin with.
And hijinks ensue.
Yes. So the lady. Oh, I'm sorry, but also the separate is Lois is in the Catwoman costume, and Selena is dressed like I guess like a reporter.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever that is, but. It is incredibly fun. It is an amazing thing. It shows the friendship between Bruce and Clark and how close they actually are. And there's a spot in there in particular where they're in the batting cages. And like Bruce, even though knowing, what Clark is capable of, is still just in the batting cage, just talking shit to him. like, I bet I could strike you out. And he's like, and then, Clark, he doesn't completely shut him down. Like he gives him just a little bit. Like, he hits one of the balls like into the atmosphere or something. He's like, yeah, let's back it off, Bruce. We both know the answer to this, right? But it's extremely playful. Like in the Tom King run, there was a lot of deep, like, heavy stuff. And this issue came from out of nowhere. And it was like, this is some of the most fun I've ever had in a comic book ever. It was a fantastic book. It gets the voice of Clark. And I love that it shows their relationship. Like, both of his relationship with Bruce and his relationship with Lois, and I think it nails it. It's perfect. I love that book, which is Batman 37 so I guess it's the Rebirth run. That's what it was. Yes. But Rebirth, number 37. That's my number 4, I guess. And that takes us back to you, Rick. If you got another book to talk about.
Well, I feel bad when I hear you guys describe exact issue numbers and dates because I only had a few.
No, you're good.
I remembered, but one that I did write down was a Superboy rather than Superman, but it's from April 1958, Adventure Comics number 247, and that is the first appearance of the Legion of Superheroes, which is a favorite of mine.
Yep.
And
I was hoping you were going to talk about this.
In the story, it was really a surprise for a young boy to read this, and you could relate to it for me because I was a boy, and these are all young characters, so it was very something you could identify with. Superboy or Clark is going around town, sometimes in his identity as Superboy and sometimes as Clark, and these strangers are speaking to him. And if he's like dressed as Clark, they're saying, "Hi, Superboy." And when he's Superboy in the air, they say, "Hey, Clark." And he doesn't know these people. They're just random people around town that are doing this. It seems to be 2 guys and a girl. And at first, he's not aware of what's going on. His curiosity is in.
So he's like, it's kind of it's crazy to him because they know who he is.
Yeah, and no one should know.
Yeah, right.
That about his alter ego, and he's very curious about this, and so he investigates a little further and finds them all together in one place, and it's intentional. They've done this to entice him, and when he gets there, they say, "Listen, we're a club of superheroes in the future, young people, and we wanted to come back in time and invite you to join us. We think you'd be a great member. We've read about you in our history books and things, and we think it would be ideal for you to be part of our team." So he says, "Well, that sounds great. I'm excited to have new friends that might have some things similar to me."
He's like, "Let's network. Let's do this."
And so they said, "Well, we have a little initiation that you have to go through, and if you can meet this test, you'll be a full-fledged member, and we'd be glad to have you."
So to put this into perspective, though, just to take a moment, I don't want to cut you off. They are from the far, 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 far away future.
30th century.
30th century. And Superman is still someone you want to have in your team. That's right there.
Right.
That's the story.
That's really true.
Right? I mean, so I'm sorry.
That's a good point.
I mean, there's been a lot of time in between. They've probably had, what happened.
There's been other heroes.
There's been other heroes. So
number 1.
Superman is still a get.
We still talk about Hercules. I mean, and that's...
Yeah.
What we're talking. That's what we're dealing with.
Which, by the way, Hercules used to guest star in Superman quite a bit in the old days, back in the Silver Age, and even brought Samson with him one time. So that was just an interesting thing that DC did. They played around with a lot of those characters from the past, and they included, like, Lois had a date with Hercules, and Lana had a date with Samson. And then Superman said, I'm glad they're off my...
Right.
I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Wait till those guys see what the girls put them through.
Yeah.
There are stories like that. I just love those. They're just a lot of
awesome.
fun. But
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
That's all right. Back to the Legion stuff. So they gave him a test, and one is him up against Saturn Girl, who has telepathic powers, to solve a certain problem. And on the way to the problem, he's distracted by an emergency, and he takes care of it, and he gets back, and Saturn Girl's already solved the problem, and therefore he's the loser. And they said, wow, there's 3 tests, and you've already missed the first one. You've got to complete one of these, or you can't join the team. Mm-hmm. So they send him out on a mission, and he's paired up against Cosmic Boy, who has magnetic powers. And again, something comes up, or he sees there's a danger that if he doesn't intercede, there's going to be a problem. So he breaks off from his test and solves the problem, and then, of course, gets back, and they say, wow, you really screwed up. Cosmic Boy did that,
0 for 2.
Yeah. You've only got one more chance. You better step it up. So he has an opportunity to compete against Lightning Lad, who is a hero with lightning powers, obviously. And he also has a similar incident happen, and he fails. Mm-hmm. So he comes back, and he says, well, I didn't do well.
Golly gee, guys, are related to join you guys, but I just can't pass these challenges.
I'm not good enough to join your team. And he says, but you know what? I've enjoyed meeting all of you and talking with you, and I think you're great people, and I respect you, and I hope all the best for you in the future. Mm-hmm. And they said, guess what? That was the real test.
That was the real test.
It didn't matter.
I knew exactly what that was going.
We actually set you up on all those failures because we caused those other problems that you had to solve.
Mm-hmm. We almost killed those people. Anyway, here's your badge.
Thank God we weren't wrong.
His flight ring, which he doesn't need.
Ring.
And so he was able to join the Legion, and they had decades of adventures, and many more characters joined the Legion, and some of them were quite interesting. And sometimes Superboy was there, and sometimes he wasn't. But what was neat is the book would sometimes be Superboy's story in the front and the Legion story in the back, until finally the Legion became so popular it supplanted it, and Superboy just became a member of the Legion, or not, and it was all about the Legion.
So Legion was selling really well
really well back then. Yeah, it was Kurt Swan drawing it, and eventually Jim Shooter was writing it before he worked at Marvel.
13, 14
years old. He was writing the stories and even doing breakdowns. So
he's on his hustle. That was awesome.
It is awesome.
A lot of great stories there.
Yeah. Well, mine's a little bit more modern. Mine's from 2003. It is Superman Birthright by Mark Waid.
That's a good one.
And this one, it's Mark Waid is one of the greatest comics writers ever, I think, and this is his favorite character. And this is his it was his shot to do a 12-issue origin story of his favorite character of all time, and he knocked it out of the park. This one it talks a lot about or deals a lot about Clark as an immigrant, as an outsider, and what it means to belong, and dealing with xenophobia of being like somebody from another planet, but then like even within him and his interpersonal relationships and the people that he encounters, he doesn't quite fit in all the time, and it's about finding your place just as a person and as a superhuman. And it was interesting because it's 2003, the year that we didn't invade a sovereign nation, and xenophobia was not a problem. Just like it's gone away now completely. So it's just as important as ever. But Superman is also a character that if like he saved you today, it would be like, again, it'd be like a celebrity you never thought you'd meet, catching you falling out of a window, and then in like 10 years, he comes by and he says, "Hey," and he remembers your name.
Hey, it's Shayne.
And that's the kind of that's kind of feeling you get from this Superman in this story right here. So Superman Birthright, it's a great jumping on point for anybody who doesn't know Superman very well or wants to get into the character. I can't recommend a better jumping on point than that.
And it was so beloved. It was supposed to be set outside of canon, and it was so beloved that it was one of those things where it kind of got
it
brought in.
Burns revised origin.
So just to show you like how popular and how widely regarded it is as far as being one of the best, that book successfully through just fans and everybody, the enjoyment of it actually made it into canon outside of, in a isolated spot, which that doesn't happen incredibly often.
And a lot of those great lines in Man of Steel, just like Jor-El saying, in time they will join you in the sun. That's all lifted from this story.
Yeah.
That was in Wade's first. So, Matt, over to you, buddy.
Okay. I want to say that this is my favorite Superman redemption story. It takes place in 1986, written by Frank Miller, colored by his wife, Lynn Varley. Dark Knight Returns shows a future which Batman has retired, and Superman, because of his aging processes, he can't hide who he is anymore, so he's a government agent.
Yep.
And he's Reagan's little lapdog.
For the Reagan administration.
For the Reagan administration. He's a lapdog for Reagan. And
that was the part that made me the absolute most mad about that book.
yeah,
I was like, Superman wouldn't do this.
I know.
The entire time, I'm like,
for
Superman
Reagan,
would do
a
this.
shill for Reagan.
Yeah. But my favorite, I love it both when Wonder Woman finally gets through to him and changes his perspective on things, and they have a coupling that cracks the earth over Corto Maltese.
Which is odd, I will say, because every book I've ever read, if Clark or Superman even shifts a little bit, Wonder Woman goes full murderer.
Yeah.
Like, she's usually
the one
I mean,
he has to stop.
Yeah. She'll be like, Clark's, she's like, Clark will be like, oh, no, we're good people. We don't do this. And Wonder Woman's like, yeah, we're good people. We don't do this. And Clark's like, well, maybe. She's like, yeah, kill them all. And then she's like, oh, wait. It's like, but yeah, it was odd. It was another thing that was odd about that story where it was like Wonder Woman was the one that's like, come on, moral compass.
She's the one that saved the planet, basically. And,
yeah. So.
But I loved it because the iconic fight with him and Batman at the end, and Batman didn't try to beat him. He just tried to beat him. He just tried to show him enough that
beat him enough.
Yeah, that he needs to fear him a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, because another great thing is Oliver McQueen only has one arm in that story, and he's the one that shoots the arrow with kryptonite at Superman.
It's awesome.
It is
so awesome.
It is.
When Miller was still cooking with gas. Yeah.
And my favorite part about the book is book 4, Batman dies in air quotes, and they're at the funeral service, and everyone's standing there talking around, and Clark is just hanging out and get ready to leave, and then he hears Bruce's heart beat, and he doesn't say anything. He just smiles. Yeah.
God,
it's awesome.
I love it. It gave us some. Like I said, it's my favorite redemption arc for Superman, and then the fact that him and Wonder Woman create Laura, and it's just I love that. Right. I love that part of the book.
Great comic.
It is.
Good call.
And the CW used the Green Arrow with one arm.
Yeah.
On their series.
I thought it was really cool because as a kid I was like, well, how's a one-armed archer work?
Also, this is an opportunity for everybody out there that paid attention to last week. Speaking of one arm, I mistakenly said that it was Johns that did that to Aquaman, and it wasn't. It was Peter David. Just so everybody knows, I'm willing to admit my mistakes and when I'm wrong. The cover artist for Justice League Dark was Ryan Sook. It was not Adam Hughes.
God, nobody likes having a friend that just points that out all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not constructive. It doesn't help. Whenever your friend's wrong, don't just.
So, I mean, I wasn't going to say anything, but while we're talking about single-armed heroes, Peter David is the one that did that to Aquaman.
The interest of integrity, yes.
Yeah. That would be back to me, I guess. So, I'm going to say, and it's topical because of the movies and stuff coming up, but All-Star Superman. Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely. It was November 16th of 2005. Excellent. First 4 panels: Doomed Planet, Desperate Scientists, Last Hope, Kindly Couple. It is truly an absolute masterpiece as far as stories go. This one also has been adapted into a fantastic animated movie. And for those of you, I mean, if you're listening to us, it's not a mystery, but the animated adaptations of the DC stories, they're pretty much all fires on all cylinders. They are all fantastic. Even like the ones we've talked about today, the Death of Superman, Red Sun is fantastic.
Animation across the board at DC is just better than everywhere else right now.
It's great. So All-Star Superman, for those of you who don't know, and I honestly, with this one, as far as details, I'm going to talk more about how it makes me feel than the actual details, because This one, I think you should read for yourself in 100% because part of the emotion is the way it's written and going through it. And it is an inspiration for the upcoming movie. So you should be doing your homework anyway. Long story short, it starts off with an adventure where Superman takes it a little too far as like he gets involved in like this radiation blast thing. And long story short, he finds out he's dying. So it's basically a Superman that has limited time. And it's the adventures are, it's like the wonders of Superman as well as him like accomplishing these milestone things in a world filled of Superman things, him accomplishing milestones until, ultimately he dies at the end. And it's all the feels. Like it's over the course of 12 issues, all of it is good. It's probably the only Grant Morrison story I've ever read where it made sense. Because
his Batman stuff didn't.
Batman is the second most coherent thing he's done.
Yeah.
It's got Shayne and I joke all the time about Final Crisis. I think between he and I, we've read it.
10
He's read
times.
it twice.
Love it.
And I've read it like once.
Gun to my head, I can't tell you what.
Yeah, I was like, Superman went back in time. That's what I got out of that. It's
great.
But it takes like a
blast.
1,500 page omnibus. I couldn't tell you the rest of it. But it captures the voice. It's tons of. Somebody else's have to.
What I thought was
it's
great about that.
I don't want to give too much away, but
It's very much like the story I mentioned from the old days.
and that's what I was going to say. I was going to
Last
run that
Days
line.
of Superman
Yes.
and All-Star Superman have their kinship.
They do. There's a through line there.
Instead of the great adventures of him making all these improvements and changes and that he, in my story, the older story, he's just going around telling his friends, I appreciate you and I.
Yes.
Sorry, maybe we haven't always hit it off, but we should remember how much we care about each other.
It's the whole time he knows he's dying and he's preparing for it. Nobody dies more nobly
Than
or
Superman.
more. Yeah.
Lois is a champ. That's what I loved about.
And I don't want. I'm gonna have to change the format. I gotta. Can we come back to you, Rick? Because my number 2 is actually Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and I think it is the perfect companion piece.
It sure is, yeah.
To All-Star Superman. It's the same feelings, the same sense of like, not foreboding. It's like death is. It's just inevitable. It doesn't have to be bad, but it's not happy. It's not good. And there's like a melancholy with both of them. But it never like overtakes you. The only time it overtakes you in whatever happens when he kills Krypto. Yeah. And if you could read that and not cry, just go back to your neighbor's dog fights in the basement. You monster.
No, it's
And the same writer is.
But I just think they're so. I think they're
please do, because honestly, I'm trying to get by with this. I don't want to do a plot by plot with this because I do think it's important.
No,
to read
with All-Star Superman, it's like a samurai Bushido trying to find a way to die nobly, and he does it. He dies better than anybody could. And then Whatever Happened to Man of Tomorrow, it's like the Last Day of Superman, where he's like, I have things to take care of before I go, and then I close the door, and that was the end. That was the end of the 38 to 86 Superman, essentially. And then you had Crisis. So, and they asked the greatest writer then and now of all time, Alan
also
Moore,
wrote
to do it.
Your story,
and then
For the Man Who Has Everything.
Around that time. So it's all of a piece. I mean, it's so terrific. And I hate to think like Superman dying can be so interesting.
Why
but
is it that
it was
there's a
a
death?
much better death than
It's not the
than
death of
Doomsday punching him till
It's
he.
the through line on all of these is, even when he is facing the thing that we possibly all fear the most, he still is the best man.
He doesn't stop
stays
being
true.
Superman.
Right.
Yeah,
You've hit the nail on the head.
all the way to the end.
And I mean, the only thing, it's been proven, like he's not really beatable. I mean, in a punchy, ultimately, I mean, he's pretty durable, and all the rest of it. What he does share with us is our humanity, and that's what we can all relate to. And that's where, I mean, my next 2 that I'm talking about are because they're 100%. I don't think there's not a single punch or anything that gets thrown in the next 2 stories I'm going to talk about, and it's 100%
Same.
about the humanity. And that's where I think that's where all of these great storylines come through, because that's where the
observation.
interest comes from. So that was your number 2 then?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, just it went so well with that and what Rick had just said about the Last Days of Superman. I was like, oh my, these are
That's why I didn't want to number either, because when
these.
he had mentioned it, I wanted to mention the through line to mine, but I didn't want to give it up either.
I number everything in its place.
It is. It's
All
great
right?
though.
If you stop doing that, chaos, society breaks down.
You got to organize.
I don't want to stop on red. I don't want to number my comics list.
So what do you have? What's another one you want to chat about then, Rick? What's your next on your list?
I was going to go lighter because we'd been talking about some more serious stuff.
No, please.
But and I was going to be more general because I had 2 that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
One of them is just the concept of a series of stories they did over a decade or so in Superman that were just so fun, and that was Superman and Jimmy in the bottled city of Kandor, which was a Kryptonian city that Brainiac had shrunken, and Superman saved it and kept it in the Fortress of Solitude. They would visit there and fight crime, assuming identities like Batman and Robin, where they were Nightwing and Flamebird. They had the Nightmobile. I loved that. As a kid, I was already into Batman and getting more and more and more into him. So to see Superman and Jimmy Olsen being Batman and Robin.
Superman's pal.
So when Superman pretends to be a superhero, he's Batman?
Yes, that was the coolest thing.
And it's important because Dick grew up in World's Finest. Robin grew up idolizing Superman. Of course, when he goes on his own, he doesn't pick a Batman thing. He picks Nightwing because of Superman.
Exactly. It's all a big circle. It's perfect.
It's incredible.
And there's a lot of Kryptonian heritage and science, and of course the fauna that caused them to pick those names, the Nightwing bird and the flame bird. All that you learn about Krypton. It gives you a little background on Superman. So it was a lot of fun. And I loved the Nightmobile. Great. It was a cool looking vehicle with flames shooting down the side.
Yeah.
For a kid, that was very 50s, 60s rock and roll.
That's cool, man. See, that stuff I need to, and I'm glad that you're presenting these because I want to go all the way back and read more of that stuff, but
I mean, there's
this
at
is
least
the stuff to start.
10 of them maybe, or 10 or 12 different stories like that.
That's cool.
Then I wanted to also mention, because I was going to be in more detail of this one, the Showdown with Lex Luthor is a great Superman book. Have you ever heard of that? It's a time where Luthor escapes from prison. He builds a robot or something and knocks the wall down and escapes. It's kind of crazy. But when he does get out, he knows Superman's after him. So he reaches out to Superman and he says, listen, I'm going to go back, sooner or later, but I think maybe we could settle this once and for all if we were to go man to man. Are you willing? Are you man enough to face man to man? And he said, if so, we'll start right now and get it over with. You don't have to hunt me, and it won't be a long, drawn-out process. We'll solve it immediately. And Superman said, well, it's worth it to me to take care of the problem right away. So he makes an arrangement to meet with Luthor, and he rockets to another world with Luthor where there's a red sun. Of course, he's going to come back by the ship, hopefully.
Sure.
But they decide to duke it out there. And they pick a kind of a desolate area, but it's a populated planet. And they, strip down to their jeans and they punch it out. And Superman's doing quite well, but it's a tough fight. Luthor's ready for him. He's been training and it's a fight. And then they have like a sandstorm on the planet and there's different weather conditions and they're separated from each other and they get into some dangerous environmental conditions. So for a while, then they've lost track of each other. In the meantime, Luthor makes contact with the civilization that lives there and he sees these farmers being attacked by these weird birds that are killing them. And he sees a way that he can rescue them with this kind of a sprinkler system that he used. And he amped it up and used it to spray the birds away. And the people are so enamored of him, they take him back to their capital city and they begin to laud him. He tells them he's a scientist and they begin. So this is taking place over several weeks. So they haven't found Superman doesn't have any powers, so it's hard for him to get back from the barren areas where he's at to find where Luthor's at. And Luthor's moved into the city with these people, and he becomes one of their idols. They almost make him a president of sorts. He's allowed to use their scientific equipment and build little machines, and he does things to help them. But eventually, Superman does track him down, and when he gets there, they're telling Superman to hit the road because they like this guy. But they arrange an arena and let Superman fight it out, and Superman starts to win, and Luthor and the people they're out of their mind with that's going to happen to their hero, and suddenly the tables are turned and Luthor gets the upper hand, and just as he's about to choke Superman to death, he stops fighting as strongly, and Superman overcomes him and takes him away, and the people are heartbroken. But Luthor says, the things we were working on, I'm going to take care of, and he gets Superman later to do the repairs and the changes that society needed to grow, and they think it's from Luthor. So he's still like a hero there, and they build a statue of him and name things after him. And Superman then takes Luthor back to jail, and he finds it so odd that Superman gave up, or that Lex gave up when he was so close to winning. And later Luthor's sitting in his cell and saying, I did that because I wanted those people to have what they deserved, and I felt for them. And it gave Luthor a whole different, we'd always thought of him as this evil, crazed maniac, and it gave him a whole different view.
I think he's always just wanted to be adored. I don't think there's like the evil
That's probably
streak.
more of what it was, yes. Yeah. But it gave us a whole different view of that character that back in those days we had never seen. He'd always just been the enemy.
That's fantastic, though, because it swapped places. Because even at that rate, as far as even if intentions are evenly matched, Superman on Earth has the entire population behind him. Yeah. Right? Even to the point where you tell us something like when Luthor does do something good, nobody believes it or that it's altruistic in any way.
Although over the years they haven't made him a businessman who has done some good.
Right.
But back in that era, he was just the crazy scientist.
President Luthor, though, that's preposterous.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that he was actually the official president, but he was honored in great ways and considered to be, a mayor of sorts of the town.
He's referring to later when he actually was.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, like, in a way, these old stories, I guess, are having a lot of bearing on the
whole circle.
For sure. I'm actually excited to hear that these exist because I'll read every single one of these.
Bare knuckle fight with Lex and Superman on a field. It was
That's
kind of
awesome.
exciting. But I don't know. I wasn't practiced to tell these stories, so forgive me for not being able to express them well. But they're great.
I think you've got
childhood memories.
You're doing great.
Detail you've left out.
You're good. Brings us back to Matt.
Yep. I want to talk about the Eisner Award-winning 1996 Alex Ross, Mark Waid, Kingdom Come.
Yeah, jeez.
There you go.
Painted in gouache, which is like a pastel watercolor, transparent. It sees a future world, and I'm sorry, the best part about this whole book is Superman with a ponytail.
Hell yeah.
That was my favorite thing.
In overalls.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he's pretty much retired.
Immune from kryptonite.
Yes.
It has been used so much.
Yes. And then, so in the future, it's an Elseworld story. The Justice League all abandon their roles because they can't differentiate between fighting enemies, or they end up fighting the same way their enemies do. And
Batman's broken all to hell. He's got
Batman has
he's got to have basically a mech just to walk. But
Yes.
it's famous. Yeah.
And Batman does that. He plays the villain where he's actually just trying to get information out of Lex Luthor. Mm-hmm. I like the fact too that Alex Ross painted his father into the book.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really neat thing to do. But that was the first time I ever picked up an Alex Ross book that I can remember, and it had an impact on me. The art was so real. The realism leapt off the pages, and it felt like I was inside there.
And it helped when they were in the real locations too.
Yeah.
You know that scene where the very first time they meet up, like him and Diana and Bruce are sitting down in that diner.
Yeah.
It just feels like it felt like a Rockwell painting.
Yeah.
Like kind of in the scenes like that. It was just so cool. Like, I don't know. It was beautiful.
Is that Magog?
Magog, yeah.
Magog, yeah. And then they take that. Everybody has this whole they're superheroes are essentially fascists or whatever. But it's like, no, that's the difference. Is Magog he takes it to that. It evolves to that.
And they irradiate half of the country.
Yeah, don't they pull somebody through Captain Atom?
Yeah,
that's
break him in half.
Such a great idea.
Yes. It was an intense book.
It was. Yeah.
One of my favorite things about it was the Shazam angle, where Batman figured out that it was Billy Batson in control and not Shazam, which I like that little. I liked all the little nuances in the book. It's a beautiful book to read. It's only 4 issues.
And that's another Mark Waid, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And it won the Eisner in 1997, the year after it was published.
Mark Waid does work.
Fantastic book.
Great book.
Yes, it is.
Magog and Gog are like from the Book of Revelation.
Yes.
In the
Yeah.
Bible.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if that's part of it or.
More than likely.
Well, Kingdom Come.
There you go.
Yep.
I'm going to talk about Secret Identity it came out January 14th, 2004, by Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen. We talked about this briefly, Shayne. This wouldn't fit on one of your lists.
No, I was not a fan. I do love the art, though. Stuart Immonen is amazing.
It is. So, Secret Identity was another thing. It was like a 4 oversized issue thing, but I like the take on it. It's a Superman story, but it's not. Superman's not in this book. It takes place in a world where Superman is just like our world. It's a world where Superman exists in comic books, but he's not a real thing. It follows a kid that's named Clark Kent, but he was named Clark Kent because his parents named him that as an homage to Superman being like somebody would do in our planet, right?
And has done.
So it opens up, it's like standard things like, ha ha ha, your name's Clark Kent. Like he gets a bunch of Superman gifts, but he hates it, like whatever. He's like a teenage kid. So the first book takes course like over like his teenage years. Long story short, he manifests powers, the powers of Superman. Like he has a fortress of solitude. And there's a lot of lines that get drawn there. Like he's a fortress of solitude, but his fortress of solitude is he sits on a tractor and actually writes stories on a typewriter. So he's actually cultivating the whole writer angle and the leading into the being the Clark Kent parts. But he gets like set up like everything's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek joke like, oh, he's you must be Superman. But anyway, it comes to be where he does have the powers of Superman. He gets them, he starts saving people, but the whole point of all of it is the entire premise is keeping his identity secret. He later on moves on to the big city and he's a writer, and his friends as a joke like try to get him on a blind date with a lady named Lois, and the first date goes really bad, and because he's all angry about the whole situation, but then they start joking about these other things and they end up coming together and they do get married. And then they have all the while the government's coming after him trying to learn his identity, and this agent, he ends up getting hooked up with this agent, and they're getting close to like uncovering who he is. So he says, okay, I'll cut you a deal. I'll do these like government jobs. Like this is the through line kind of like to the Dark Knight stuff. He takes like a government job doing jobs for them as long as you can keep my identity secret, because he finds out that Lois is pregnant and she's having twins. And so he does these secret jobs. So each book like transfers forward like 20 years at a time. So the first one he's like in his teens, and the next one he's like in his 30s, and the next one he's like in his 50s, and then the next one, like the very last book, he's like in his 60s and like retired and stuff. So he still has those superpowers. You find out that he got his powers actually through some weird asteroid storm that hit where he was growing up, and the powers were manifested by basically what your thought process was. So like he was constantly being bombarded with all of like the Clark Kent and Superman like story stuff.
All the parallels.
Right, and all the parallels. So when it hit, that's what actually gave him those powers, because that was what he manifested those more or less. So they're at the end of their life. The secret agent guy, like he's retiring, and he's like, I've actually known who you were this whole time, but I've never let anybody know. And he destroys all the information. He's like, I've got girls too. I understand that. He still has powers as an older gentleman. He goes out on some mission, and then his girls show up, and he finds out that they have powers. I like the way that I thought it was a good idea. I thought it was executed fine. Like, it's not like the best writing I've ever seen, but I like the idea of it being a Superman story that's in reverence of Superman without being Superman. But it kind of runs that line. It kind of makes it a joke a little bit, but then also the writing is just the big idea of it is really cool. So
yeah, and it makes a lot of lists. And I mean, I'm probably just in the minority here. It just didn't connect with me. I don't know. It was. I don't know if it was a.
He's a little cynical, is the thing.
He is.
It's the writer from the Thunderbolts, which
yes,
he was a good writer on that title, because he surprised me with the fact that they were the Masters of Evil at the end.
Music, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Who's done stellar stuff? I mean,
Astro City.
Yeah, Astro City. His Avengers run is excellent. He did what was the one he did? Marvels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it just walks that line between like meta and would I rather be flying a kite. So like, I think it's just a personal preference though for me. It's not like it's not good or bad.
I like the art style, not unlike Alex Ross. You can tell it's kind of like photo
Realistic.
inspired and realistic in that way, and it was cool. It was just, I guess the big thing is I read a Superman story that didn't have Superman in it. It's kind of what it was, and it kind of had that embodiment of it. Like his Fortress of Solitude is still it is the place where he goes alone and he hones his craft and stuff like that. But it's a tractor, like so he's still on a farm. It's just there's a lot of parallels and it's fun. That's why I liked it.
No, it's a different way to look at the Superman mythos too.
Yeah.
So I don't. Yeah, I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I got something out of it. But
yeah. So that's my
had to make somebody's top 5.
Yeah.
Rick, let's hear from you again.
I came to this without really having a top
No, you're
5.
good.
Yeah.
And since you had a story without Superman, I wanted to at least mention briefly that there was a story where there was a Superman red and a Superman blue in the Silver Age, and their costumes reflected that there was more blue on one and more red on another, and they were married and had interesting lives. But it was in one of those imaginary tales where it didn't matter what happened at the end, so you could do anything wild you wanted to in the story. It's just a good one to read. I recommend it, but it's not the one I wanted to mention right this second. The one I want to mention right this second is when Superman, in his latest adventure, he flies back to his Fortress of Solitude to do some experimentation, which he often does with some things that he's found on his many adventures. And he gets to the fortress, he uses the giant airplane marker key to unlock the giant door, because it's not the crystalline version from the films. And he goes inside and he finds a message that said, "Ha, I've been here and you don't know who I am." That's not a quote, but that's the gist of it.
So the Joker was there?
Yeah.
Right, sorry.
I've been here and you don't know who I am.
I apologize. I don't remember the exact quote, but I was just paraphrasing. Anyways, it takes him off guard, of course, because one would think no one could get inside the fortress. You have to be superhuman to lift up the giant key and to manipulate it in the lock. So he does whatever he's going to do there, and it's weighing on him, but he leaves and he goes and does other things. And a day or so later, he goes back. Voila, same problem. Someone has moved the statues of his friends in his museum of friends and statues that he has. It's kind of a Madame Tussauds kind of wax museum or whatever. There's some things that have been moved around, and he recognizes that someone's moved some stuff around. So now he's starting to get scared because he has weapons there too that people could get into and maybe use in a horrible way. So I think he leaves again and tries to figure out who it might be and checks some things and can't come up with anything. And for whatever reason, he gets scared and goes back and checks again, and more stuff has been changed. And he decides that he needs to stay there and figure it out. And ultimately, there's an earthquake that happens, and the whole place is buried or the exits are buried in rubble, and a piece of kryptonite has been freed somewhere in the either the mountain or the fortress stores, and he's lying there helpless next to the kryptonite, and it looks as if it's going to be his last day on Earth. It's huge. It's larger than a basketball, and it's definitely enough to kill him. As he lies there moaning and appears to be near death, suddenly a character comes out of the shadows, and it's Batman.
Okay.
And he rescues Superman and says, "Are you okay? Can I do anything to help you?" And Superman says, "I knew I would figure out that it was you, or that someone was here doing this to me, and this is how I did it. That was fake kryptonite. I just caused this whole thing to help me figure out who was the culprit that was doing all of this." And it was Batman was there for his birthday. It was a little mystery for Superman to throw him off because he's so smart and he has superpowers and he can figure everything out. And so he thought of as being a great detective and having all these angles that Batman has, he had hidden himself inside a secret compartment he had built into the key.
So Batman's gift to Superman was an escape room?
Basically that was it. And it's a story that in 1960, who would have ever expected?
Sure, that's
that? 'Cause
cool.
I'm reading the whole story thinking Superman's in deadly danger, and he says, "Well, how did you ever figure out it was me?" And he said, "I figured out it was probably you because the the statue that I had, or the sculpture I had made of you to honor you here in my museum, I noticed there was a blob of similar material melted over here in the corner. And sure enough, Batman had used a laser to melt it down and had replaced himself in that statue position for at least one visit that Superman had been there. I know that's pretty 60s.
That is kind of funny.
But that's how Superman really picked up the first clue. Oh, wait a minute. This is some kind of practical joke.
You know,
it's not a danger.
Superman, world's greatest detective, right?
It ended up being that at the end. I love that. So I just thought that was worth mentioning and maybe a good, fun read.
That's cool. That's awesome. Shayne.
Well, okay, my number one, since these are numbered, in ascending to descending order, because society has rules. You're just gonna let the animals out of the zoo?
No.
Jesus.
I'm gonna change my numbering though.
Mine is my all time. It's a single issue of Superman. I think it distills the character down to exactly the best attributes of him. It's Superman 148, which takes place. It's right before your 149 from earlier, and so I don't know now. I don't know if it's an Elseworlds tale or not, what have you. But it's Superman versus the IRS essentially. Superman owes $1 billion. So this IRS tax adjuster, he's like, Superman has never paid taxes. He's out here fighting crime. He's never paid tax. Like, I don't have a single return from him. He's like, and he gets, people give him the keys to the city. They give him dignitaries give him stuff, and he puts it in the Fortune office. Like, I know you made an income, so he figures out you owe $1 billion, and if you don't pay it by, I think, tomorrow, you're going to prison. This is true. His name's Rupert Brand, I think. This little what kind of ass bag
is that Dead Man's dad?
He's probably the same guy that wouldn't cry when Crypto died. So Superman's like, well, that's the law. I got to come up with this cash. So he goes around and he keeps trying to find out ways to come up with the money. He tries to do something with the coal to make it into a diamond. Something happens that chemistry. I don't know that he can't do that. So he goes to Aquaman, and he wants to seed the biggest clam in the ocean to make the biggest pearl ever. It's like, that'll put a dent in it. Again, it doesn't really work out.
In 24 hours again.
Yeah, so at the end of it, he doesn't have any money. He can't do it. He can't come up with it. So he goes to the IRS office and he turns himself in. He's like, I just can't do it. You got me. I'm ready to go serve my time. And this guy, Brand's boss, comes in and he was like, the hell are you doing? And he's like, well, he owes $1 billion. Look here. And he has it all written out. Like, it's there. He's not running game. He really has figured out this is how much he owes. And the guy is like, are you kidding? So he comes up, his boss comes up, there's a rule in the tax code that he shows him, and it's that you can claim $600 for any dependent that you have. And he's like, Superman has saved this state. Superman has saved this bus full of people. Superman has saved
this country.
This country. Superman is. He's like, are you kidding me? In our lifetimes, Superman, we're all his dependents. Mm-hmm. And if he claims $600, if anything, we're lucky that he hasn't asked anything of us.
He's like, he hasn't asked for a return. Yeah,
it's great. He's like, he doesn't owe us anything. If anything, we owe him, and that's what this whole thing is building up to. And it was absolutely terrific. It's such a great stickling.
I love that, and I did read that story back in the day, and it has that 60s feel because remember John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
And this was a 61, firmly in that. Yeah, I also like that, Superman, this guy in a gray flannel suit, you owe us that. He's, oh man, okay, sir, let me go and figure this out. I'll be back tomorrow.
So he goes to Aquaman. Let's make this giant clam.
So yeah, and he does try to write him a check for $1 billion, but it is from the National Bank of Krypton. Yeah. So the guy's like, we can't take that because it's another planet that blew up.
Their banking system has collapsed.
Yeah, so if anything, he should be they should arrest him for trying to pass
for fraud.
Bad check.
Yeah. That's what I was saying.
Passing bad checks.
We got him.
It's a bad check. Krypton's not even real anymore. That's awesome. That is intriguing.
It's a great story.
Those are the kind of things, though, that were very popular during that era. Mm-hmm. And we're used now to stories that tell long, involved.
Yeah, but each issue then was its own story.
Standalone. In case you only picked up that issue, you still had a really good story, and that's what brought you back.
It's great.
So that was a good choice.
And then they killed him in the next issue.
Yeah, for the next issue.
Because he didn't pay his taxes.
There you go.
There you go. That's awesome. Matt. What do you got for us?
Okay, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty on this one too hard because it is new, but volume 6.
So, Dawn of DC, new Superman book.
yeah.
Yes, we're only 3 issues in, and I don't want to go too far into it, but issue 1 sees Superman returning to Metropolis. Lex is behind bars. Lex has created a super core, and it kind of helps Superman a little bit, which is weird, but it's the first Superman book that I've read and since Super Sons that I felt was fun and enjoyable, and I didn't have any problems.
It's been action packed.
Yes.
And
But I don't want to.
Parasite. Yep.
Yeah, I don't want to give it. I don't want to have too many spoilers or anything. But scientifically, I think I can prove that this is a better story because going into this book, I think between Action and Superman, we had 3 or 4 pulls. We're I don't know about 7 times that just from the 3 issues of Superman.
Yeah.
So the rest of the world thinks I'm correct too.
Yeah, it's been a good run. I'm going to reserve some judgment.
Yes, because we're only 3 into it. But I feel like there's hope back in the book. I feel like there's a purpose. It feels interesting.
And somebody's smart because they're fucking with Lois, which is the way to get Superman involved.
Oh yeah.
So
I like the action stuff that Johnson was doing, but yeah, this is a great jumping on point too.
Yeah, it is perfect. And
Just right there.
yeah, we're right at the beginning.
It's Josh Williamson, right?
Yes, sir. And Jamal Campbell did the art.
Oh, that's
so Far Sector, man.
There you go. There you go.
Killer
Whoop,
stuff.
whoop.
Yeah.
So please pick it up. You will enjoy it.
It's been good, and it's still out of all these books on the list, it's the most accessible.
Yeah.
By far. Because I mean, a lot of these other stories, it's going to be collected edition or some other way, but those are still very real and very able to get your hands on them. So
We still have the floppies.
there we go.
What's your first?
Frig, what's your number 1?
This was rough, but
Your number 1.
you know what? I'm gonna rearrange when I'm done. Whatever. The one next. I'm gonna put this number 1. I legit cried. We talked about it yesterday. I read it. I found it. I read it.
Did you cry again?
I cried. Okay. So the year is 2010, July 14th. The issue is Superman 701. J. Michael Straczynski and Eddie Barrows on art. So this was a run. Straczynski was on, I think it was like 10 issues. This was right before New 52. So this was him on Superman right before they had blasted everything out with New 52. And he actually, I looked into it more, this run was like 10 issues. It's just called Grounded. That's the overall arching arc, and that's the premise of it. So this book opens up with, I would arguably even say, it's smart. It's like 2 pages and like 8 panels of these guys working on a pickup truck. And like one guy bent over it and 2 or 3 of his buddies just chiming in, being like, have you checked the carburetor, blah, blah, blah. And he's just being snarky back and just talking a bunch of trash. And then the last panel of it, he's like, it's the fuel pump. And then the guy's talking trash like it's one of his buddies again, but instead it's Superman. Like Superman uses X-ray vision. He's like, it's the fuel pump. So it goes directly from that where he's walking down the road. Just Superman's just walking. And there's a entire like news crew. Like, so this is very, very Forrest Gump. Like he's got a lot of media attention stuff. Like he's walking, he's not flying, he's not doing anything else. He's just walking, but that's his purpose. He's in Philadelphia and he's walking around just doing Superman stuff on the ground. The next thing he does, he goes to this diner and he's like, oh, geez, it's funny because he's got like this little cape pocket and he pulls out like money. He's like, I really want to try one of those famous, cheesesteaks, but I think I'm going to have to get the coleslaw or whatever because I don't carry a lot of cash. He's like, unless there's something around here I can do to work it off. And he goes back in the stock room and it's a mess. That he comes back, one of these deals, like completely immaculate, and he gets this Philly cheesesteak. And then he keeps on walking down the road from there, and Lois shows up and she's like, okay, well, what am I supposed to tell Perry? What's Clark doing? He's like, well, he's chronicling the Superman journey. He's like, and what about everybody else that's following you? He's like, all I'm doing is walking. Nobody's going to have an attention span that long. They'll disappear, and I bet you it'll last 4 hours. Well, sure as hell. In about 4 hours, they all lose. And he's like, I'm not going to watch Superman walk around. There's no reason to there's nothing going on. So it's just like a few more little points. And I promise the ending of this book is what makes me cry, and it is absolutely incredible. We'll get there. But you have to understand how awesome he's being throughout all of this as well. He's like, talking with citizens and just hanging out. And everybody's like, oh, hey, Superman. And he's taking the time and he's hanging out with them and he's talking with them. And like in the diner, it shows like time elapsing and, you know, people are talking about, you know, he overhears a conversation where you're like, oh, so-and-so moved in and now drugs are a problem, you know? So then he walks over to that neighborhood and the drug dealers are like getting in Superman's face. And he does his heat vision and he burns all of their stash and they leave the neighborhood. And the guy's like, well, aren't they going to go somewhere else? He's like, yes, but they're not here and I'll take care of it somewhere else too. But for now, you know, my eyes are on here. He's like, you guys are protected. They won't be in this neighborhood anymore. Like just doing Superman stuff. Fast forward to the end now. All these things happen. Still nothing crazy. Like this is something that any normal person could do with the exception of setting drugs on fire just with your imagination. But the rest of it is just normal stuff. He gets to this part where there is a building in Philadelphia, like more downtown, and he sees a bunch of people standing around looking up, and there is a lady on a ledge of the building. And the cops are like, you've got to go up there, you got to take care of this, like this lady's going to jump. So they've got good intentions, but the cops are like, they're like, Superman, go up there and get her and bring her down. And he's like, I'll talk to her. So he flies up there and he floats. And he's like, and she's like screaming. She's hysterical. She's like, goes on and on. Her mom had died. Something else had happened. She was like, I can't do any of this anymore. Like, I'm done. That's it. And she's like, and another thing, I've heard that you don't lie. And I need you to promise me that if I decide that I'm jumping, you will not catch me. Promise me you will not do it. You will not catch me or you will not grab me and you will not take me down against my will. And he's like, I won't do that. So then the next panels show time going on and the sun setting and stuff like that. And it's complete silence. He's just sitting there like hovering the whole time, just there for her, like waiting for her to talk. And she talks about it and she brings up a question. And this is the part that gets me. So he says, I dealt with this also. I had a very personal friend that was dealing with this. And he's like, I want you to make a decision, you know, because she was like, I'm going to do it, this and that. And he just brings it, he just lays it out for her. He's like, if you think, he's like, and I had a friend and I wish I could have told him this. If you think that you have at least just one out of all the rest of the days of your life, one happy day. He's like, if you think you will never be happy again, if you will never feel that, never feel joy, never feel anything, you can step off of there and I will stay true to my word. I will not catch you. I won't let you, I won't do anything. I won't intervene. But if you feel like there's at least one day that you could possibly be happy, take my hand. And there's like this big anticipation thing where it has the panel and it's kind of, you don't know if she's going to do it or not. And the next panel is him holding her because she takes his hand instead. And I'm going to get like, it is very powerful. And he goes down and he, she's safe. And the cops are all like, oh, we thought you were going to grab her and whatever else. And the last panel on it is, hey, like, if she didn't take your hand, like, you were going to catch her anyway, right? And then in the next panel is just him walking off saying, have a good night, Sergeant. And it's completely like, it leaves it up to you, like, would he have honored, like,
yeah,
Superman, would he have done it anyway? Or is the truth more important? And that just like, I don't know. It gets me. And it's very well, I love it because he does not, the only time he's flying is when he's sitting there hovering 4 hours just talking. And that's my best part. He doesn't throw a punch. He helps somebody with their fuel pump. He organizes a back room. And he eats a Philly cheesesteak.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's like in Straczynski, I think he gets that run gets completely overshadowed because too many things were moving around.
Yeah. And then it ended with, and then New 52 made such a splash that all that stuff got overshadowed.
Yeah. Because then it's like, hey, Morrison's on action and all that other stuff.
Because he was doing Wonder Woman at the same time. And it was also some of the best Wonder Woman ever. And it got stopped by New 52. But yeah, no, it's a great story. Grounded is amazing.
Sorry, I went into that kind of deep and specific, but like yours said, like how he goes to them, he's like, all right, guys, he's Superman, he didn't have to. Like, all right, guys, I don't have the money, let's do this.
But rules are rules.
But rules are rules. And it was...
I think, if any, like, forget, like, Parasite or Metallo or Luther or Zod. I think for 85 years, he's been fighting cynicism and winning.
Yeah.
Year in and year out.
That's...
The rest have nothing for him.
And, yeah, 85 years, it's been...
He looks great.
He does.
He hasn't aged a day.
Doesn't look a day over 35.
But I've had a blast with him for the years that I've had, 42 of them, a few of them that I've been aware of.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you, I guess, to Siegel and Schuster also, ultimately.
Schuster, Swan, and Adams, and
All the greats.
everybody who's written and drawn them.
And you guys, anything else? Any other closing thoughts on Superman? Rick, anything?
What do you hope to see in Superman in the next 10 years, Rick?
Let's see. There you go.
I just wanted to mention a couple other little things we didn't have time to talk about here. Just quick tidbits.
You're good. You're good.
Superman had
is
a
our tribute.
mermaid girlfriend, Laura.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you?
Laura Lemaris. You know, he rescued her from a fall from her wheelchair and realized that she was a mermaid, you know, and fell in love with her in college long before Lois. You know, when you read those stories, it's an amazing time in Superman's career that a lot of people don't realize today that are out there. How about when the U.S. had a circus, again, another circus story. A circus had a chimpanzee that was very skilled and talented and did a lot of tricks. And for a promotion, the circus arranged something with NASA to let this chimp go up into a capsule and do an orbit around the Earth, and hoping to build attention for the circus and for the space program. And while it was up there, an asteroid of uranium and an asteroid of kryptonite combined and crashed right in front of it. And when it came back down, the chip grew to 70 foot tall and had kryptonite vision. And they called it Titano the Super Ape. And it was, deadly because of its, powers over Superman with the kryptonite vision.
My grandparents still remember the day where they were the day that happened.
He could murder you with a toot.
And then Lex Luthor wanting to make a duplicate of Superman and failing and making Bizarro. And these are characters that you will
Multiple times,
be
actually.
rewarded by reading their stories.
Because the successful one became Superboy eventually.
Yeah.
When he merged their, together.
Yes,
in
the
Man.
big
Yep.
stories. And then there was another one weird story I just want to mention before you close out tonight, and that is there was a story where Superman had the worst day of his life. Everything went wrong. It was a little 8-page story in the back of a Superman comic we weren't expecting to read. Every call he went on, something failed, or the police didn't do what they were supposed to do, or the citizen didn't do what they were supposed to do, and everything was going wrong, and he was just having the most horrible night. Some things even maybe seemed a little supernatural or unusual. And by the time you got to the end of the story, it said, go back and look at the title of the story. And you went back and looked, and the title of the story was The Night of March 31st. And when you turned the page, it said April Fool's. All this, none of this happened to Superman. None of these things went wrong. Everything went right. His whole day was great. And it was just a total surprise.
It's kind of a dick move.
But I mean, comics were so different back then.
Yeah.
You were expecting there to be some supernatural element to it, and it ended up just being an editor's joke.
Nah.
And it was the last story. You had already had 2 good Superman
Sure.
stories before it. It was the 3rd story in the book. So
That's the one you remember, though.
I did remember it after
that's cool.
decades. So I just wanted to mention that Superman has such a rich history of bizarre stories that you can find something for anyone in there. And that's one of the things that makes him one of the greatest characters of all time, if not the greatest character.
And the best of the best, and what we all should aspire to be. That's why he stood the test of time. He is what we all should be, but, has the powers on top of it. But take those away, he's still Superman.
So I'll keep shooting for it.
There we go. And with that, we tell you to support your local comic shops, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.